Imagine the day is hot. It's the kind of hot that sticks to your skin like wet wool. The Roman sun is relentless, falling heavily on your tunic as you walk along the crowded streets of the city. You're already sweating, already tired. And so you do what everyone else does. You go to the baths, the thermi. Not a private luxury, but a public routine. For most citizens, rich, poor, or somewhere in between, it's simply part of life, like eating or breathing. But this isn't your world, not quite. You step in and immediately, you're swallowed by the noise. The first thing that hits you isn't heat, it's voices. Dozens, hundreds of overlapping conversations. Jokes in Latin, arguments in Greek, greetings shouted from across tiled rooms. Somewhere, a group of men are playing dice. Another corner smells faintly of perfumed oil and faintly stronger of feet. The bathhouse is big, grand even. The ceilings stretch high above you, steam swirling beneath vaulted domes. Light filters in through carefully placed glass, diffused into a soft haze. There are statues here, 2 gods and emperors, their eyes unblinking, watching. But despite the scale, the space is crowded. Very crowded. Elbows brush against bare arms. Sandals slosh through puddles on the stone floor. Somewhere nearby, a child is crying. Servant scrubs at the floor with a stiff-bristled brush. Another stands beside a brazier, feeding it with charcoal, eyes glassy from the heat. You try to follow the flow. First comes the appetiterium, the changing room. You remove your clothes completely and place them in a cubbyhole in the wall. If you're lucky, you brought a slave to watch over them. If not, well, theft is common. Now naked, you step toward the tepidarium, the warm room. It's gentle here, a kind of comfort. The air is dense, but not suffocating. The floor beneath you is warm, heated from below by a hypocaust system. A Roman marvel of engineering, where slaves toil beneath the floor, stoking fires to maintain the temperature. You won't see them, but they are there. The heat builds slowly. You begin to sweat, and your skin shines with moisture. Others do too. Beads of sweat drip onto the marble benches. A man beside you scrapes his arm with a stridular curved blade used to clean the skin. Not soap, but oil. Thick, fragrant oil is applied first, then scraped away, along with dirt and sweat. You try it. Right. The stridule is cold and rough. Your skin stings faintly afterward. But it's the done thing. You endure. From here, the heat rises again. You enter the caldarium, the hot room. The floor is slick. The air is thick, almost hard to breathe. Your chest tightens. You sit on a bench or try to. It's hot to the touch. Round you, others groan softly in the heat, their bodies shining, their limbs loose and heavy. Some pour ladles of hot water over their heads. Others lie flat, trying to endure the temperature. There is no silence. Voices carry. Philosophical debates, gossip, boasts, grumbles. The sound of water being poured. The scrape of stridules. Somewhere a man is singing badly. Laughter follows. And yet you stay. Because this is what it means to be Roman. Eventually, drenched and dizzy, you move to the frigidarium, the cold plunge, a pool of water, still and clear, and very, very cold. You hesitate. Others don't. They dive in, their skin steaming. You follow. The shock hits you like stone. Your muscles seize. Your teeth clench. But then, gradually, the cold becomes clarity. The sweat disappears. You feel clean, almost reborn, but not for long. You leave dripping and step back into the appetiterium. Your clothes are missing, gone. No slave to watch them, no compensation. You're handed an old towel and told to check the lost bin. You do. You find a pair of sandals that aren't yours and a tunic that smells of garlic. You wear them anyway, and you leave clean, perhaps, but dazed, and not entirely better off than when you arrived. Because for all their ingenuity, for all their rituals, Roman bathhouses were never about comfort. They were about conformity, about being part of the Roman rhythm, the Roman smell, the Roman sound. And for an outsider, even a time traveler, it's all just a little too much. Even if you survive the heat, the scraping, and the theft, there's still the chance of illness. Skin infections, fungus, parasites, communal water, unfiltered. One cut in the wrong place, and the next visit might end with a fever, The Romans bathed often, but not necessarily well. That's why you wouldn't last a day. The streets have quieted now. The bathhouse fades behind us like steam into the sky. The crowds grow thin, and the shadows lengthen across Rome's ancient avenues. We are turning now from the heat of daily routine towards something grander, something heavier. Not a place this time, but a person, okay? A man crowned with power. Wrapped in togas heavy with symbolism. Burdened by empire and driven by something deeper than ambition, curiosity. He was Hadrian, Rome's philosopher-emperor, builder of walls, lover of cities, griever of loss, and in the end, a man undone by silence. Let us begin, not at his peak, but at his origins. A young provincial in an expanding empire. Hadrian was born in the year 76 CE in Italica just outside modern-day Seville in Hispania, far from the Roman heartland. His family, though wealthy and connected, was provincial. Roman, yes, but not Roman-born. In a city of status, this mattered. Even as a child, Hadrian was different, studious, quiet, a lover of Greek, which to many Romans seemed suspiciously decadent. But for Hadrian, it was a lifelong love language, art, and philosophy. He was more drawn to ideas than to war. And yet Rome had no patience for thinkers who did not also act. By adolescence, Hadrian was sent to Rome under the guardianship of his relative Trajan, a general, a soldier's emperor, and the one who would eventually adopt Hadrian as heir. There was ambition there, but also politics. Hadrian had to prove himself in campaigns, in court, in commands. He did what was expected. But even as he advanced, he remained reserved. He preferred study to speeches, sketchbooks to scrolls. When Trajan died in 117 CE, the succession was swift, perhaps too swift. There are whispers still that the adoption was forged after Trajan's death, that Hadrian's claim was paper-thin, held up by loyalty, not law. But no matter. The army accepted him. The Senate, if reluctantly, bowed. Hadrian was emperor. The man who said no to war Rome was vast. From Britain to Egypt, from the Rhine to the Tigris. But Hadrian, unlike his predecessor, did not want to expand. He wanted to consolidate, to strengthen, to stabilize. His reign marked a subtle shift in tone from conquest to cultivation. He traveled constantly not from luxury, but out of duty and desire. He walked among the legions, studied cities, commissioned architecture, redrew maps, and rewrote orders. He wore the military cloak, but rarely drew the sword. He reinforced borders rather than pushing them. This, to some, looked like weakness, but it was, in truth, strategy. Hadrian saw what others refused to, that Rome had stretched too far. Perhaps no project reflects his reign better than the wall in Britain. Hadrian's Wall, a cold line across the northern landscape. Not a wall of isolation, but a statement, a breath, a boundary. Rome would go no further. Here it would hold. It still stands, in part, a broken spine of stone and memory, a monument to pause in an age that prized motion. A city of his own, his travels continued. He visited every province, left statues, roads, and regrets behind him. But one city above all held his heart: Athens. There Hadrian poured wealth into temples, libraries, and columns. He adorned the old city with new glory omen in power, Greek in grace. He fancied himself not merely an admirer of Greece, but a part of its legacy. And in the hills outside Rome, he began building something strange and personal. Hadrian's villa, not a palace, a world, a miniature empire of architecture and imagination. Greek theaters, Egyptian courtyards, reflecting pools, marble halls. The villa was a reflection of his mind, a restless map of every place he had loved. Not for politics, but for memory. And perhaps for mourning. Antinous, for in all his travels, one figure began to appear constantly at Hadrian's side. A youth named Antinous, beautiful, quiet, Greek. Their relationship, whatever its nature, was deep. Hadrian adored him. Portraits survive. Statues more than of any other imperial consort, male or female. In Hadrian's art, Antinous is a god. But in 130 CE, During a journey down the Nile, tragedy struck. Antinous drowned. How exactly remains a mystery. Some whispered it was an accident. Others said it was ritual, or sacrifice, or suicide. We do not know. What we do know is that Hadrian was broken. In the months and years that followed, the emperor deified the boy, named cities after him, founded oracles, built shrines, commissioned endless likenesses in marble. Even in a world of deified emperors, this was unusual. It was grief, carved in stone. And from this point forward, something in Hadrian changed. The end of the philosopher-emperor. In his final years, Hadrian grew ill. The illness is unknown. Perhaps heart failure, perhaps fluid retention, perhaps more. But the pain was constant. His patience thinned, his temper sharpened. He withdrew, grew suspicious, executed perceived threats, argued with the Senate. The gentle traveler became the wounded autocrat. Eventually he named a successor, not his first choice, not even his second, but a man he hoped could repair what Hadrian had strained, Antoninus Pius, who would go on to rule peacefully. Hadrian died in 138 CE. His ashes were placed in a mausoleum by the Tiber, now known as Castel Sant'Angelo, left behind walls, roads, statues, and questions. Was he loved, feared, admired, pitied? Perhaps he was all these things. A man who tried to hold an empire not in his fists, but in his thoughts. A man who traveled more than any emperor before or after, who built beautiful things, who mourned beautifully too. A man who in the end could not escape the weight of memory. The sun is lower now. Rome is behind us. Its noise and grandeur muted like the memory of a dream. We journey south, past hillsides and olive groves, until we find ourselves at the base of a mountain. A mountain that, today, sits quietly beneath a haze of cloud and time. But on one day just one long ago, this mountain roared. It's Vesuvius. And beneath it, two towns, Pompeii and Herculaneum, were buried in fire. Forgotten for centuries, and uncovered like secrets, half remembered in the earth. Let's go slowly now, gently, downward, into the silence beneath the ash. A town like any other Pompeii, before it was entombed, was not a city of emperors. It was not the seat of senate or spectacle. It was ordinary. That's what makes it extraordinary. It was a market town, bustling but modest, with homes, bakeries, workshops, inns. Its streets were lined with stepping stones to avoid puddles. Its walls were painted with graffiti, some crude, some poetic, a place of gardens, gossip, and goats. And for years it had lived in the shadow of Vesuvius, unaware that the mountain was not merely a hill but a volcano. Even when the ground shook now and then, the people stayed.
Nice.
Life went on. It always had. Until one morning, in 79 CE, the earth rumbled more fiercely. A column of ash rose, impossibly high. And then it began to fall. The day the sky fell, we know what happened not from legend, but from letters. Pliny the Younger, a Roman official, wrote of the eruption from across the bay. He described a cloud like a pine tree rising and branching and the smell of sulfur. He told how day turned to night, how the sea receded, and how his own uncle Pliny, the elder, sailed toward danger to try and help. But his account is only a glimpse. In Pompeii, the story is written in stone. The first wave was ash finale, choking, relentless. Roofs collapsed under its weight. Streets filled. People fled. Some prayed. Some sheltered. Then came the pyroclastic surge, a wall of fire, gas, and pulverized rock moving faster than sound. It erased everything, not just buildings, but bodies. They did not burn. They froze, mid-motion, in curled postures. Some hiding their faces, some holding one another. Centuries later, as excavators dug into the compacted ash, they found hollows, spaces where bodies had been, long decayed. They filled them with plaster, and what emerged were people, now caught not in death but in the instant before. Herculaneum, the other silence, if Pompeii is the famous sister, and Herculaneum is the quiet one, smaller, wealthier, better preserved. Where Pompeii was buried in ash, Herculaneum was swallowed by mud superheated and dense. It moved slower, but it sealed tighter. Wooden beams survived. Doors, scrolls of papyrus, charred but legible. Fruit still in bowls, loaves of bread in ovens. A city caught not just in moment but in texture. They found skeletons along the shoreline, families huddled in boathouses, waiting for rescue that never came. One held a child, another clutched a bag of jewelry. We cannot know their names, but their presence is vivid. And so, Herculaneum whispers even more softly than Pompeii, but no less clearly, what the cities taught us. Before the discovery of these towns in the 18th century, our image of Rome was marble and myth, triumphs and temples. But Pompeii and Herculaneum revealed something else: the mundane. Graffiti complaining about bad wine, wall paintings of simple meals, tavern with spilled amphory, a family shrine by a kitchen hearth. There were shops, there were schools, there were sinks and toilets. There were people fallible, funny, frightened, alive. It is perhaps the only time in history where we can walk through a Roman town as if it were still warm. Even in ruin they live, in their routines, their jokes, their laundry lines, their laundry lists. They do not teach us of glory, they teach us of presence. And then stillness. Vesuvius sleeps now, smoke sometimes, but silence, mostly. And the towns beneath it, though unearthed, remain quiet too. You can walk those ancient streets today, can peer into homes, see the grooves of carts in stone, the footsteps of ghosts. But if you close your eyes, it becomes even clearer. The clink of a cup, the rustle of linen, hush before a question is asked. These are not the sounds of tragedy, they are the sounds of life, interrupted. Yes, but not erased. The ash has settled, the fires have faded. We leave behind the market stalls of Pompeii and the drowned arches of Herculaneum and begin a slow ascent, rising along stone roads that wind through cypress groves and olive trees, up the hillsides of Campania. There, perched above the chaos and clamor of the city, are the Roman villas. Not palaces exactly, though some are grand. Not farms exactly, though land surrounds them. They are retreats, sanctuaries, stages of power, wealth, and quiet display. Tonight, you enter one, not as a guest of honor, perhaps, but as a shadow, drifting room to room, seeing life unfold behind shutters and silence. Let us step inside. The entrance, vestibulum, and atrium the villa begins not with a gate but with a threshold. A heavy wooden door studded with bronze. Quiet now. But earlier today it opened and closed, often servants entering, couriers delivering scrolls, a guest or two arriving unannounced. Now the house is dim. It's the last of the day's light filters in through the impluvium, shallow basin in the center of the atrium, where rainwater collects. Above it, a rectangular opening in the roof, called a compluvium, lets in sky. You hear the gentle drip, drip of water. The air smells faintly of wax and oil, maybe crushed mint. Someone was sweeping earlier. Traces of ash are still being cleaned from yesterday's hearth. Along the walls are ancestral masks, masks of those who came before. Their hollow eyes stare forward, not in menace, but in memory. They remind all who enter, this house has roots. The triclinium. Where the elite dine, we pass into the triclinium, the dining room. 3 couches surround a low table, not chairs. Romans of status dined reclining, propped on one elbow, eating slowly, speaking softly. The evening meal, the cena, is over now. But its scent lingers. Earlier guests tasted olives from the villa's own grove. They dipped flatbread in Graham-fermented fish sauce, salty and pungent. They sipped watered wine from glass cups, delicate, imported from Alexandria. There were lentils, roast duck, honeyed dates. The meal was not rushed. It stretched over hours, accompanied by quiet conversation. Perhaps a recitation of poetry, or the soft plucking of a cithara. No shouting, no politics. Now, only crumbs remain, and the faint shimmer of oil lamps. The library and study. A room for reflection. The villa's master, wealthy, likely educated, keeps a tablinum just off the atrium, a study. There are scrolls here, carefully stacked. Wax tablets with names etched in them. Perhaps a miniature bust of Cicero sits in the corner, eyes forever thoughtful. This is where letters are read, contracts are reviewed, poems are half finished, then forgotten. Quiet reigns here. Even the slaves, when entering, do so with measured breath. In the late morning, the master might pace slowly through this room, dictating correspondence, or reviewing the latest gossip from Rome politics, lawsuits, markets. But now, it sleeps. The lamp has been snuffed, the wax cooled. The cubiculum, where they dream bedrooms in Roman villas, are surprisingly small. Cubicula, they're called square rooms, dark, with little more than a bed and a stool. Mattresses were stuffed with straw or wool. Linens dyed in pale hues, pillows of goose down, if wealth permitted. The head of the household might lie here now, half asleep, listening to the breeze through the shutters. In another cubiculum, his wife might murmur a prayer to God before drifting into sleep. Children are already asleep, curled on small cots under linen sheets, their dreams filled with centaurs and kitchen smells. Sleep comes early in the countryside. The peristyle, the garden within at the villa's heart, is a gardener. Peristyle, surrounded by columns. Even at night, it breathes. Fragrant herbs, basil, thyme, lavender release their scent. A small fountain trickles in the center, surrounded by marble statues of dryads and river gods. Lamps burn in sconces along the walkway, their flames swaying gently with the wind.
House.
This is where the house exhales.
House.
In the afternoons, the lady of the house might have strolled here, humming, or a tutor might have instructed a young boy in Homer. But now, the garden is empty, only the night birds sing. The kitchen and slaves' quarters. Work, even in silence behind the beauty, is function. The colonna, or kitchen, is a room of smoke and brick. Clay pots line the walls. Stew pot, still warm, sits over smoldering coals. The cooks have gone, but a young slave boy lingers, checking the fire, making sure it dies safely. The slaves' rooms are small and dark. Some sleep on pallets of straw, others in shared beds. Their day begins before the sun ends, long after the last guest has left. Yet even here there is routine, a rhythm, slow clock made of orders and footsteps. The night falls over the villa above it all. The stars hang silent. From a terrace, you might see the Bay of Naples glinting faintly under the moonlight, hear the faint lapping of waves, smell the salt. The villa rests, like its inhabitants. Its walls breathe with history. Its floors remember footsteps. Its columns stretch toward the heavens unmoving. Tomorrow will bring visitors, dust, a letter from the capital, a delivery of figs. But tonight, all is still. Imagine yourself waking just before dawn, not to the ring of an alarm, but to the cold, the kind of cold that clings to your bones before you've even left your bed. You rise in the darkness beneath layers of rough-spun wool. Your breath is visible. There is no fire yet. It burned out hours ago. Someone must coax it back to life. You are a free farmer in Scandinavia. The year's somewhere around 860. There is no central calendar, no ticking clock. Time is measured in seasons, in tasks, in the quiet repetition of needs. Your house is made of timber and turf. The walls are thick. Not to keep heat in there is very little of that, but to slow the invasion of wind. Smoke blackens the beams above. The hearth sits in the center. There is no chimney, only a vent in the roof, and not always an effective one. You live in a long house, one room for the whole family, parents, children, perhaps a grandparent or two, and sometimes animals, especially in winter. Cattle are valuable, too valuable to leave outside. So at night they are brought into cows, a goat, maybe a sheep huddled at one end of the house. Their smell fills the air, not entirely unpleasant, just ... constant, warm, earthy, sour. You stretch, stiff. Your body aches, not from injury but from habit. You pull on a tunic, woven by your wife or mother, or perhaps by your own hand. Over it a wool cloak fastened with a simple brooch. Your boots are soft leather, lined with fur, not waterproof. It will be wet before long. Outside, the day begins gray. The chores are not glamorous. They never are. First, the animals. They are fed hay, if any is left from last summer. Water is fetched from the stream, or from a barrel if it has not frozen. You check the fence again. It leans more with each passing storm. You make a note in your head. Fix it when time allows. Then, the manure. It accumulates, always. You shovel it into a wheelbarrow. if you are lucky enough to own one. Otherwise, you carry it by hand in a wooden bucket. It is not waste, not truly it will be used to fertilize the fields in spring. And then the wood. You chop it daily, even if there's already a stack. Wood is like time, there is never enough. Your axe is sharp. You sharpen it often. Not for battle, but for fire. For warmth, for cooking. Your hands are calloused, your palms cracked. You do not complain. There is no one to complain to. Later, the family eats. The food is simple. A thin porridge of barley or oats, salted if you are fortunate. Perhaps some milk if the cow is giving. If not water, maybe dried fish. Never enough. Meat is rare. Reserved for special days' weddings, births, funerals, in the deep nights of Yule. But today is not Yule. Today is just a day. The landscape and the seasons, your land is not flat. It rolls, dips, and rises again. Rocky in places, wet in others. The fields are small. Cleared slowly, painfully, with wooden plows and simple tools. Stones must be removed by hand. Tree roots burn slowly, sometimes for days. Crops are basic: barley, rye, sometimes beans. The growing season is short, and the soil is not forgiving. A good year is one where no one goes hungry in March. You rotate fields when you can. Let one lie fallow. But there is rarely enough land for that luxury. The seasons govern everything. Hope and mud. Summer is maintenance. Fence mending, harvesting hay, drying fish. Autumn is harvest. Barley gathered in woven baskets. Grain dried and stored in wooden bins. And winter is waiting, always waiting for the sun to return. For the thaw. For the fish to run again. Well, at daily work and domestic life, your wife works harder than anyone. She weaves, she spins, she tends the children. She brews ale from barley and herbs. She makes cheese. She dries herbs for medicine and cuts strips of leather for repair. She keeps the household alive. When you are too tired to speak, she sings softly to the youngest. You may not be able to read, few can, but you know stories. In the evenings, you sit by the fire. Smoke coils upward. The air is thick, but the company warm. Listen to tales of Thor and Loki, of Odin wandering in disguise. Of a hero who sailed west and never returned, you pass around a horn of ale. It is thin, but warming. The children lie down where they sat. Sleep comes naturally. You bank the fire and lie down beside them. The wind howls outside. The roof creaks. But inside is the rhythm of breath. It's a sound of quiet survival. Closing this segment, life as a Viking farmer was not about glory. It was about endurance, about waking up again the next day, about doing what needed to be done, without question, without reward. You were not rich. You were not remembered. But you were part of something of a world turning slowly beneath a northern sky. And that was enough. Now that we've left the longhouse behind, now that the cattle have settled and the embers are glowing faintly, let us drift into a story that begins with soil and storm, but soon turns to swords, exile, and poetry. It is the story of a Viking unlike most others. It's a man who lived, quite literally, between violence and verse. His name was Egil Skallagrimsson. His life was preserved not in records or carved stones, but in a saga told aloud generation to generation until it was finally written down centuries later. And while sagas often blur truth and tale, what remains is something deeply human. A story of contradictions, of brutality and brilliance, of grief and honor. Let us begin, gently, with his birth. A harsh beginning. Egil was born in Iceland, sometime around the year 910, to a powerful family with Norwegian roots. His father, Skallagrim, was a strong and severe man-a-settler, a warrior, and a blacksmith. His mother, Bara, was more measured. They lived on a homestead called Borg, surrounded by hills and fjords, where the wind swept in from the North Atlantic, and the grass grew short and tough. From a young age, Egil was ... different. According to the saga, he was large and dark, with fierce eyes and a temperament to match. He was said to speak in verse before most children spoke in full sentences. And even as a child, his strength and temper were feared. When Egil was 7 years old, he killed another boy over a game with an axe. The saga does not shy away from this, but it does not linger on it either. This was a world where childhood ended early, where boundaries were blurry, where justice was local and shaped by family, status, and swift reaction. Still, even in that world, Egil stood out. Warrior and wanderer as he grew, Egil took to the sea, like many men of his class and age, but not merely for fishing or trade. He joined raiding expeditions first to the Baltic, then to Britain. He fought in England, where he clashed with King Athelstan and later served him. He fought in Frisia, now the Netherlands, and sailed up and down the coasts of Scandinavia, alternately making alliances and breaking them. His saga describes him as fearsome in battle, unpredictable in peace, and always willing to speak his mind. But Egil's weapon was not just his sword, it was his voice. The poet with the axe, Egil was not just a warrior, he was a skald of Viking poet, master of verse, meter, and metaphor. In that time, poetry was not a hobby. It was a weapon, a form of diplomacy, a shield against death. According to the saga, Egil once composed a praise poem overnight for King Athelstan, who had considered executing him. The poem was so good, so elegant and structured, that the king not only spared him, he gifted him silver. Later in Norway, Egil wrote a curse poem against King Eric Blood, axe-scratching runes of hate into a post and erecting it on a hill. The king, hearing of it, was said to grow ill from the shame. His verses still survive. Over 60 poems, some fragments, others complete. They are dense, woven with kennings, those cryptic, metaphorical phrases that Viking poets loved. The sea is the whale road, the sword is the wound hoe. Gold is fire of the hand, and yet beyond the metaphor.
Lies something emotional?
Because Egil also wrote about grief. A poem of loss in his later years, Egil suffered a devastating loss. His son drowned, far from home. A promising boy, bright and strong. His future undone by a sudden accident or slipped. A boat overturned, and the cold swallowed him. Egil was inconsolable. He stopped speaking, refused food, sat in silence, until his daughter, sensing his pain, placed a wooden harp in his lap and said softly, "Write for him." And so he did. Composed a long and aching poem called Sanatoric, Loss of a Son. It is one of the earliest surviving expressions of personal grief in Norse literature. There are no boasts, no blood, just a father, broken. He wrote of the sea as a thief, of the gods as cruel, of his arms too weak to avenge fate. And yet, the poem ends with something close to peace. Not acceptance, perhaps, but endurance. That same Viking rhythm. Live. Bear it. Wake up the next day. Chop the wood. Feed the animals. Tell the story. Egil's final years, Egil lived a long life, unusually long for his time. Blind in old age. Stiff, still stubborn, still respected. He died around the age of 80. At home in Borg, surrounded by kin. His bones were said to be buried near a church. Later excavations found skulls so thick they could deflect a sword blow. Whether true or not, the story remains. Egil was both feared and remembered. Legacy Egil Skallagrimsson was not a hero. He was not gentle, capable of violence, of loyalty, of art, of sorrow. He represents the Viking world not as myth, but as paradox. Where a man could carry both an axe and a harp, where poetry could be a gift, or a weapon, where rage and tenderness lived side by side. And in his saga, passed down through the smoke of long houses and the ink of monks, Egil still speaks. Not loudly, not gently, but honestly. The sea is calm tonight. Imagine it now at surface, smooth as polished stone, barely moving beneath a wide gray sky. A shoreline curves in the distance, soft with grass and pine. And on that shore, just beneath the soil, something sleeps. Something ancient, carefully hidden for over 1,000 years. Not a village, not a fortress, but a ship. And not just any ship. This is the Oseberg ship of Viking burial of such richness and silence that even today, it hums with unanswered questions. Let us begin not with discovery, but with what it once was. A ship for the dead, The Oseberg ship was built around the year 820 CE, long before the height of Viking expansion. It was not made for raiding. Its hull was shallow, its curves delicate, a vessel of prestige, not war. Its prow rises like a serpent's neck, beautifully carved in swirling tendrils and animal forms. The wood, though faded now, was once polished smooth with oil and care. The ship itself is nearly 22 meters long, longer than most modern buses, and entirely handcrafted from oak. Overlapping planks, ribbed beams, iron rivets, driven one by one into place. It sailed once, daps along the Norwegian fjords, but not far. Its greatest journey was its final one, when it was pulled ashore, placed in a burial mound, and filled with offerings for the afterlife. The burial chamber inside the ship, just behind the mast, was a small wooden structure of burial chamber, now long rotted away. But once finally built, its walls painted red and blue, and there within it were two women. Their bodies were found side by side. One older, perhaps in her 70s, stooped, arthritic, once tall, the other younger, in her 40s or 50s, of uncertain origin. Their faces are lost to time, their identities never carved in stone. Were they priestesses? Nobles? Mother and daughter? Ruler and servant? No one knows. But what was left with them speaks of high status, reverence, and perhaps something more. The grave goods imagined walking into the burial chamber on the day it was sealed. Every corner of the ship filled with offerings. There were wooden carts, carved with dragons, sledges trimmed with iron and painted with animals, beds, buckets, baskets, and looms, a tent frame for shelter, a cooking tripod, textiles some of the finest ever found in Viking Europe, woven in geometric patterns, dyed with plant pigments, rich with color and care. There were animal remains, too. Horses, oxen, dogs, likely sacrificed as part of the funeral, right? So their presence suggests wealth. Yes, but also cosmology. In Viking belief, the journey to the afterlife required companions. In all of it, every item was arranged deliberately, almost tenderly, as if this were not a grave, but a gift. The mysteries, and yet for all the riches, there are absences. No weapons, no gold or silver, no runestones to name the dead. The skeletons themselves told little. The older woman may have suffered from cancer or long illness. The younger woman had a broken collarbone, possibly healing. No obvious sign of status, no crown, no regalia. So who were they? One theory suggests the older woman was a Velva Cirrus, a spiritual figure with knowledge of fate and the gods. The presence of certain herbs, wands, and amulets suggests ritual purpose. Others think she may have been royalty, a local queen, perhaps even connected to the legendary Queen Sa, who appears in later sagas. If true, this would make the ship not just a burial, but a monument to a dynasty. Some speculate further still that the younger woman was a sacrificial companion, interred to serve the elder in the afterlife. But this remains unproven. The ship does not say. It simply waits. Discovery and preservation. The Oseberg ship was discovered in 1904, buried near the Oslofjord in southern Norway. The find was accidental farmers digging into a grassy mound. What they unearthed would become the most significant Viking archaeological discovery ever made. It took months to excavate, each piece lifted by hand, mapped, catalogued, whispered over. Today, the ship rests in a museum. Or most of it does. Time, insects, and exposure have taken their toll. Even now, preservation continues slow. Careful work to keep the past intact without disturbing its stillness. Visitors walk around the vessel in silence. Not because they are told to, but because they feel it. What the ship still holds. The Oseberg burial reminds us that Viking life was not just war and exploration. It was ritual. It was craftsmanship. It was awe in the face of death, and care for those who had passed. These women, though nameless, were cherished. Their lives mattered. Their deaths were honored. They left no sagas, no conquests, no known descendants, only this, a carved ship, grave on a hill. 1,000 years of silence, and now you, listening, wondering, drifting just a little deeper. We've seen the quiet struggle of the farmer. We've followed the stormy saga of a poet warrior. We've walked among the relics of the dead. Now, let us step inside the world of the living. Not the battlefield, not the burial mound, but the home. The Viking longhouse was the heart of Norse domestic life, a place of warmth and shelter, of food and fire, of gossip, work, and sleep. Imagine the door opening now. It creaks softly on its hinges. A low gust of wind swirls in behind you. You brush off the snow, step inside, and pull the door closed. Darkness, then warmth. Then the scent of peat, smoke, and stew. You are home, the structure and shape. Viking longhouses were long, narrow, timber-framed buildings, typically ranging from 15 to 75 feet in length, depending on the status and wealth of the owner. Their walls were made of wood planks or turf stacked over stone, with roofs thickly layered in sod or thatched reeds. The structure curved slightly at the end. It's almost like a ship turned upside down. And inside, single open room. The roof arched high above, supported by beams dark with smoke and age. There were no hallways, no upstairs, no privacy in the way we understand it. But there was space, and that space was filled with life. The hearth and the heart at the center of it, all the hearth. A long, open fire trench, shallow and lined with stones. Smoke drifted up through a smoke hole in the ceiling, or simply lingered, curling through the air. It stung the eyes, yes, but it warmed the body. Around the fire, the house lived. Cooking pots hung from iron hooks. Children squatted to stir porridge or throw scraps to the dogs. Women sat with wool in their laps, spinning thread by the firelight. Meals were eaten here on low wooden benches. Songs were sung here. Stories told. And in the winter, when the snow drifted high against the outer walls, everyone huddled close. The fire never went out. If it did, the house would quickly chill to the bone. Daily life inside the longhouse was always busy. During the day, people came and went men off to tend livestock or work the fields. Women fetching water, washing clothes, dyeing wool. Inside, older family members tended children, repaired tools, and prepared meals. Children learned by watching. There was no formal school. Skills were passed down, task by task. A boy might learn how to shape a bow by carving scraps. A girl might be given her first spindle at 5. The smell inside the house was rich, not unpleasant, but layered. Smoke, boiled grain, wet wool, sweat, herbs hung to dry. In one corner, barrels of dried fish. In another, a loom for weaving. Bowls were carved from wood, cups from horn, platters from thin slate. Time passed slowly. Days were marked not by clocks, but by chores. And as the sun set early in the north, lamps were lit, simple clay or bronze bowls filled with fish oil and a wick of moss. Sleeping arrangements, there were no bedrooms. Sleeping was done on raised platforms built along the side walls, simple wooden bunks filled with straw, covered in wool blankets or animal hides. Families slept together, parents, children, perhaps even servants, depending on the size of the household. Sometimes a dog curled at the foot of the bed, twitching in dreams. There was talking before sleep, sometimes singing. Soft argument over who forgot to salt the fish, then silence, except for the fire, always the fire. Chieftains and halls of power, not all longhouses were humble. For the chieftains, wealthy local rulers or war leaders, the longhouse could be larger, more elaborate. These grand halls, called mead halls in poetry, were places of hospitality and politics. Here, warriors gathered on feast days. They drank mead from horns, listened to skalds recite sagas, and pledged loyalty to their lord. The walls might be decorated with tapestries, the benches lined with furs, the roof beams carved with runes. But even here, among the powerful, the structure remained the same. One room, one fire, one breath, shared by all inside. Power was not measured by separation, but by gathering. By how many could sit at your table. By how many voices could join the toast. Domestic religion and rites at one end of the longhouse, often near the main post or beam, was a household shrine, small altar. Perhaps a carved figure of Thor or Freyr, gods of strength and fertility. Offerings of grain, ale, or a sprig of pine might be placed there before meals. Religion was part of daily life, not apart from it. There were no grand temples in every village. The longhouse itself was sacred. Births, weddings, and deaths were all marked here, under the same roof. Children were named at the hearth. Ailing elders were watched over in their beds. The home bore witness to every stage of life. The sounds of the longhouse, if you listen closely, even now, you can hear what once filled that space. The rhythmic clack of loom weights, the soft gurgle of stew in a cauldron, a wooden bucket placed gently on the floor, a child giggling then shushed, a dog's tail thumping in sleep. The door creaks. Someone returns with a load of firewood. They shake the snow from their cloak. A gust of cold sneaks in. Then silence again. The rhythm of the longhouse was not fast. It was circular, repetitive, familiar, comforting. And in that repetition came survival. Imagine the room, dim, with filtered sunlight. The air smells faintly of old ink, bamboo oil, and damp parchment. Wooden shutters creak softly in the breeze. You sit, hunched over a low desk, brush in hand, eyes straining to copy one character, then another, then another. You are perhaps 14, but you've already been doing this for years, and you will do it for many, many more, because you are on the path of the Confucian scribe, the bureaucratic heart of ancient Chinese government. A path that offers honor, status, and a life of relentless discipline. Let's begin at the beginning, not with paper or ink, but with your training. A childhood of repetition. You were not chosen by chance. From the age of 4 or 5, your family, if they were ambitious and could afford it, enrolled you in a local school or brought in a private tutor. Your first lesson was simple: memorization. Before you could write, you had to recite. The 3-character classic, the Book of Odes, the Analects of Confucius, line after line, verse after verse, not just read, not just understood, memorized. Your mind became a scroll, your mouth a stylus. There were no distractions, no playtime carved out, only duty. Errors were corrected with discipline, sometimes sharply, because everything rested on these words. The imperial examination system. Once you were old enough, perhaps in your teens, you began preparing for the great mountain of all scholarly life, the imperial exams. These were not small tests. They were a towering, multi-tiered ordeal stretching across days, sometimes weeks, depending on the period. And what was being tested? Your memory, your penmanship, your ability to analyze a Confucian text in strict poetic structure. You were seated in a narrow stone cell, barely wider than your arms. You brought your bedding, your brush, your food. And for days you copied, composed, and prayed for no mistakes. A single smudge, an error in form, a stroke too short or too long, and your attempt was invalidated. Many failed. Most failed, and yet they returned year after year, because passing meant one thing: a future, the work itself. Let's say you succeed. You pass the local exam, then the provincial, perhaps even the imperial. Now, you are a junior clerk, scribe in some distant administrative post. Your life consists of writing. Every single day, you copy tax records, you transcribe letters, you recopy old laws verbatim, you enter household counts, grain tallies, conscription quotas, legal verdicts, and letters from the capital. All by hand. Every brushstroke must be perfect, uniform, centered. Your tools are simple: a bamboo or wooden brush worn to a fine point, an inkstone, ground fresh each morning with water and soot, a stack of thin bamboo slips, silk or paper depending on the period, a small cloth for drying your hand. You sit cross-legged on a mat. Hours pass. Sometimes you blink and realize your eyes are burning. Sometimes your hand cramps. But there is no room for pause. Mistakes are noticed. Errors and punishment. There is no backspace, no edit. If you copy a character wrong in a legal decree, the consequences can be dire. If a tax number is off by one column, a whole village could face miscalculation, and blame might return to you. Penalties for clerical error ranged from demotion to physical punishment. In some dynasties, repeated mistakes could mean banishment. There were no unions, no holidays. The idea of a weekend had not yet been born. The hierarchy of the brush: you do not write for yourself, you write for others, always. There is no room for creativity, no poems, no fiction, only what is assigned. And above you stands a long line of supervisors. Each level of scribe checks the work below. Each mistake is noted, and advancement is slow, but still. You press on, because you are a bridge between the rulers and the ruled. You are one of the few who can read and write, and for that, you are both respected and endlessly burdened. The quiet moments, and yet not every hour is hard. Sometimes when the courtyard is quiet and the dust hangs gently in the morning sun, you look down at the characters and admire their flow. The dance of ink on silk, the precision of the stroke order, the elegance of a phrase rendered just right. And in that moment, you feel pride. Not loud, not grand, but steady. You do something that matters, even if no one says so. Now imagine yourself not as a clerk, but as a child born into nobility, a child destined to rule, and not merely to rule a province or a people, but to conquer all under heaven. This is the story of Qin Shi Huang, the first emperor of a unified China. Figure as monumental as the walls he built, and as shadowed as the tomb he left behind. His life was grand, methodical, and ultimately haunted by fear. A story of power won, and peace never truly found. Let's begin, as all such lives must, with his beginnings. Birth of a king, Qin Shi Huang was born in 259 BCE, during a time when China was not a single country, but a patchwork of warring states. Now, his given name was Ying Zhang. He was the crown prince of the state of Qinwan, of the most militarized and disciplined of the 7 major kingdoms competing for dominance. His early life was shaped by palace intrigue, assassination plots, and the looming pressure of succession. Even as a child, he was watched and weighed. At just 13 years old, Yingzhang became king. Too young to rule on his own, his early reign was steered by regents and ministers. But by 22, he had taken full control. And with control came ambition. The unification wars from his court in Shenyang, he launched a series of calculated, brutal campaigns against the other 6 states. His strategy was not reckless conquest. It was systematic dismantling, as the state of Han fell first. Then, Shao, Yan, Wei, Ku, and finally, Qi. Each defeat brought new land, new enemies to absorb, and new resistance to quell. By 221 BCE, at the age of just 38, Yingzhang had achieved what no one before him had managed. He had unified all of China under a single rule. To mark this unparalleled achievement, he renamed himself Shi Huangdi, or First Emperor, not King. But emperor title meant to last forever? Reforming the realm with unification came standardization. Qin Shi Huang believed that a stable, orderly empire required one system, one voice, one law. So he set about reshaping daily life in ways large and small. Weights and measures were standardized. Single currency was issued throughout the empire. Writing characters were unified to make official documents readable across vast distances. Roads were rebuilt and widened, all designed to the same specifications. Even the width of cart axles was standardized to ensure smooth travel across imperial roads. It was an empire run like a machine, efficient, impressive, and tightly controlled. And at the heart of it all were the scribes. Every reform, every policy, every edict flowed through their brushes. The Qin Empire was built not just with swords, but with ink, rule of law, and fear, but control came at a cost. Qin Shuang's legal code was harsh. Minor offenses were punished severely. Families could be implicated for a single man's crime. Whispers of dissent were met with swift silence. And in 213 BCE, fearing that uncontrolled knowledge might undermine his authority, he ordered the infamous burning of the books. All texts not related to medicine, agriculture, or the Qin legal code were to be destroyed, especially Confucian writings, which emphasized loyalty to moral virtue rather than to state law. Hundreds of scholars were reportedly executed buried alive, according to some sources, for defying the order. Whether this happened exactly as recorded is debated, but the message was clear: dissent would not be tolerated. Qin Shi Huang ruled with the belief that peace came through obedience, and obedience was enforced. A restless mind, even in triumph, the emperor was uneasy. He feared assassins. He changed palaces frequently. He surrounded himself with guards and courtiers, but trusted few. And more than anything, he feared death. So he turned his mind and his wealth toward the quest for immortality. He dispatched expeditions to find the Isles of the Immortals' mythical lands, said to hold the secret to eternal life. He employed alchemists who gave him potions, many laced with mercury, ironically hastening the very decline he hoped to avoid. And underground and secret, he commissioned his greatest project, a mausoleum, vast and hidden, guarded by thousands of clay soldiers. A tomb intended not just to house his remains, but to mirror his empire. More on that in the next segment. The Emperor's End. In 210 BCE, while traveling through the empire on a ceremonial tour, Qin Shi Huang fell ill. His death was kept secret for weeks. His advisors feared unrest. They transported his body in a cart of fish to disguise the smell. They forged his final orders to maintain stability. Eventually, the truth emerged. And with it, the empire began to unravel. Within 3 years, rebellion spread. By 206 BCE, the Qin dynasty, so mighty and precise, had collapsed. It had lasted just 15 years. And yet it had changed everything. Legacy of the first emperor Qin Shi Huang is remembered with both awe and discomfort. He unified China but crushed its dissent. He reformed systems but ruled by fear, dreamed of eternity but died chasing shadows. And though the Qin dynasty vanished, its structure became the template for all that followed. The idea of an emperor, of a centralized bureaucracy, of a codified managed society, these did not die with him. They became the bones of China's future. And somewhere, beneath a sealed hill in Shanxi province, he still rests, waiting. Imagine standing on a raised wooden walkway. Below you stretches a vast, open chamber not of air, but of clay. Thousands of lifelike soldiers, still and silent, line the ancient floor. Each one carefully placed, each one facing forward, each one slightly different. There are no voices, no sound. It's just the hum of centuries-old stillness. You are not in a battlefield. You are standing above the terracotta army, entombed beside the first emperor of China, and though their mouths are closed, they still have something to say. Discovery in the dust. It began with an accident. In 1974, during a time of drought, a group of farmers near the village of Lintong, outside Xi'an, began digging a well. Their shovels struck something hard, a shard of what looked like pottery, but it wasn't a pot. It was a fragment of a face. Soon, archaeologists arrived. Excavations began. And what they found, slowly, cautiously, was unprecedented. A full military formation, buried in precise formation, life-sized, life-posed, life-quiet. Each figure made not of stone or wood, but terracotta clay fired to permanence. And they were not buried alone. An army like no other so far, over 8,000 individual figures have been uncovered: soldiers, archers, generals, charioteers, and even horses. Each was created by hand, assembled from molds and sculpted with unique details. No two faces are the same. Some have serene expressions, others look stern. Some wear heavy armor, while others are dressed in lighter tunics. Their hair is styled according to rank. Their hands posed to once hold real weapon spears, swords, crossbows all long since removed or corroded away. They stand in long corridors, separated by earthen walls, like open barracks. Their hollow eyes face east, the direction of the emperor's enemies. Some believe they were meant not just as guards, but as proxies, ready to fight in the afterlife, should the emperor's soul be challenged. The mausoleum complex and the army is only one part. The site, as currently mapped, covers over 50 square kilometers, a sprawling underground complex. It includes administrative offices, modeled in miniature clay replicas, bronze chariots, pulled by terracotta horses, acrobats, musicians, and court attendants, positioned near where entertainment halls might have been. Even stables and granaries, complete with clay feed troughs and food storage jars. It was an empire underground, a mirror of the one above, designed to continue, beyond death. And yet, the most sacred space of all, the central tomb of Qin Shi Huang, remains unopened. The unopened tomb, the mound that holds the emperor's body, still rises above the earth, a grass-covered hill nearly 80 meters high. Ancient records, including the records of the Grand Historian by Sima Qian, tell of an interior like nothing ever built. A model of the universe. Stars painted above with mercury-based paint. Rivers and seas of liquid mercury flowing through the floor. Crossbows set as traps. Hidden passageways. A ceiling said to sparkle with constellations. Modern surveys have indeed detected high levels of mercury in the soil. Ground-penetrating radar reveals large chambers still untouched, but no excavation has begun. Why? Because the technology to open such a tomb without destroying it is still evolving. And there is caution, respect, and perhaps fear. Hidden meanings and messages beyond the craftsmanship and military precision, scholars continue to ask, why such scale? Why such realism? Some theories suggest the terracotta army was a political message, a declaration of eternal rule, a warning to those who might resist, even in spirit. Others believe it was more personal, that the emperor, obsessed with immortality, sought to create an afterlife bureaucracy, an empire in death, that functioned as efficiently as the one in life. Even the placement of the figures who stands where, and what rank, facing which direction offers insight into Chinera military structure and hierarchy. It was not just art, it was administration, cast in clay. And even now, more soldiers are being found, still buried, still waiting. Archaeologists believe only a fraction of the full mausoleum complex has been excavated. Most of it lies in darkness. It's unmapped, unrevealed. A quiet army, and so they wait. The warriors, the horses, the scribes, the dancers. Frozen in formation, untouched by time's rush. If you were to walk among them tonight alone, with a lantern in hand, you might feel something between awe and unease. Not because they threaten, but because they endure. So much labor, so many hands, so many years spent building a world no living person would ever see again. But they are seen now, by us and by you. Their message is not one of war. It is one of eternity, of a ruler's wish to be remembered, not just in name, but in form. Imagine yourself standing just outside the palace gates. The air smells faintly of incense, and the wind shifts the banners that hang along the courtyard walls. Drums echo softly from deep inside, marking the changing of the hour. This is the imperial precinct, centuries before it would become the sprawling, symmetrical marvel known as the Forbidden City. This is where dynasty took root in layers of marble and silence. Let's step inside, carefully. Before the Forbidden City as we know it, the vast, walled palace complex at the heart of Beijing was not begun until the early 1400s, under the Yongle Emperor of the Ming Dynasty. But the concept of a centralized, ritualized court life where the emperor lived and ruled in relative seclusion existed long before. Even in the Han, Tang, and Song dynasties, there were precursors. Large palace compounds, inner courts, strict ceremonial codes, and complex bureaucracies. These early courts were the living blueprints for what would become the Forbidden City. Protocol and space. Step past the threshold, and you enter a world governed by ritual and precision. The further you go, the fewer people are allowed to follow. Gate after gate, courtyard after courtyard, till you reach the inner sanctum where even the highest ministers may never step. Every movement inside is choreographed. Officials walk with their arms tucked in sleeves. When they bow, it is to a specific angle. Even silence has meaning. Speaking out of turn can cost a career. For those who served here, behavior was power. Who lived within? Inside these early palace compounds lived a spectrum of figures. The emperor often shrouded in mystery, even to those closest to him. The empress and consorts, confined largely to the inner palace, their lives tightly regulated. Eunuchs, who served as gatekeepers to the emperor's presence and later would become powerful figures in their own right. Court officials who labored daily in drafting documents, reports, petitions, and law codes. Their lives were vastly different from those of the village scribe or outer official. Here information was currency. Proximity to the throne determined one's fate. Daily life behind walls. The life of a palace official was a quiet storm. Each day began before dawn, with courtiers assembling in outer halls for morning audiences. Some might wait hours without ever being called forward. Others would spend entire days revising a single scroll before presenting it. Meals were taken in silence. Servants moved swiftly and without acknowledgement. The emperor might remain unseen for weeks, his edicts delivered through a screen, his presence felt more than observed. The Forbidden City, once complete, would enforce this invisibility with design. The emperor's residence was placed at the absolute center. Outer courts handled politics. Inner courts held the domestic world. No area was crossed lightly. Every wall had a purpose. Gardens and stillness. But not all was rigidity. Inside the inner precincts were gardens, some modest, others elaborate, designed for moments of meditation, poetry, and retreat. Stone paths curved through bamboo groves. Small koi ponds glimmered in the sunlight. Pavilions housed calligraphy scrolls and instruments. Here the emperor might compose a poem. Consort might walk in silence, unseen by the world. Even in the heart of authority, there was space carved out for solitude. Construction begins when the Ming dynasty relocated the capital to Beijing. The dream of a palace that embodied all of heaven and earth finally took material form. Beginning in 1406, over 1 million workers were employed to construct the Forbidden City over the span of 14 years. Artisans from every province contributed. Gold-tiled roofs visible from afar, carved stone balustrades, engraved with dragons and phoenixes, polished vermilion doors, lined in rows of 9 in imperial number, canals, bridges, platforms, all laid in precise celestial alignment. This was no longer just a residence. It was a cosmic map rendered in wood and stone. The meaning of forbidden. Why forbidden? Because entry was restricted. Commoners were not allowed within. Even officials needed special permission. And inner palace women never left its walls without decree. The city's name itself, Zhejiancheng, or Purple Forbidden City, referred to the North Star, the celestial palace of the heavens. The emperor, as the son of heaven, lived at its center, not a god, not quite a man, but a figure through whom order flowed. The dream of control, much like Qin Shi Huang, later emperors sought to preserve order through design. But here, the focus was not conquest, it was containment. By organizing space, protocol, speech, and movement, the court hoped to ensure harmony. And though the Forbidden City would see wars, fires, and dynastic change, the concept remained. It stood as the symbol of ultimate control and ultimate seclusion. Imagine waking up to the gray light of dawn, the hearth cold, the air inside your home heavy with the scent of smoke and damp straw. You're not in a city, not in a castle. You are in a peasant's hut, a structure of timber and earth, thatch and threadbare fabric. The walls bulge slightly with age. The roof leaks after even mild rain. And the floor beneath you is little more than packed dirt mixed with straw to soften the footfall. Outside, the village is stirring. A dog barks, crow calls from the roof line of the crumbling chapel, and someone, already, is hammering at a frozen water trough with a stick, trying to break the surface. This is your life, and it will not change much. You are one of millions in medieval France people, whose names are lost, but whose lives shape the land more deeply than any king's decree. Daily struggles, food, fire, and fatigue. There is work to do before the sun rises fully. The fire must be coaxed back to life from last night's embers. If it has gone out entirely, you'll need to visit a neighbor hoping they've kept theirs alight. Your breakfast, if it can be called that, is likely a piece of coarse bread, baked days ago, but edible, when soaked in thin ale or goat's milk. The bread is made from grain you did not fully own. Each year, you owe a portion of your harvest to your local lord, another portion to the church. And if your village has a mill, you must pay to use that too, often with a share of your flour. So by the time food reaches your family's table, it has already paid its debts. You eat what you grow, what you can barter, and what you can stretch. Your round labor, your tasks, follow the seasons, but there is no season of rest. In spring, the plowing begins long. Cold hours behind a wooden plow drawn by oxen, or, if you're lucky, a donkey. In summer, the harvest must be brought in with scythes and flails. In autumn, grain must be threshed and stored carefully, because spoiled harvests mean hungry winters. And in winter, there is mending to do, tools to repair, firewood to gather, livestock to tend. The cycle never ends. There is no guarantee of reward. Floods can ruin fields. Frost can kill early sprouts. And pests, beetles, disease can undo a season's work in a single week. Home and hygiene, your home is functional. but not comfortable. It may have one or two rooms, shared with your entire family, and sometimes a pig or two in colder months. And the walls are made of wattle and daba, a mixture of woven sticks and mud, which holds heat poorly and leaks when it rains. The thatched roof is home to lice, fleas, and the occasional rat which you chase out with a broom, but never truly banish. Bathing is rare, and often communal, done in rivers, ponds, or wooden tubs, if water is hauled from the well. The smell of manure from humans and animals alike is simply part of daily life. It clings to clothing, to skin, to breath, and yet in all of this, there is a rhythm, a kind of survival harmony. The world is small, but known, each path familiar, each field named, each season respected. The role of the church in your village, the church stands at the center. Its bell marks the hours. Its priest presides over birth, marriage, and burial, and its teachings shape your understanding of life's hardships. Taxes must be paid, not just to the Lord, but to the church. At times, you might owe a chicken, a portion of eggs, or a day's labor to maintain the church grounds. The calendar is filled with holy days, some of which offer brief rest. But even the feasts are modest. And sermons often remind you of your place in the world's grand order, humble, pious, and obedient. The church gives meaning but not relief. Sickness and survival. Medicine, as you know it, is a mix of folk wisdom, herbs, and prayer. There are healers in the village, often elderly women with knowledge passed from mother to daughter. They treat with poultices and teas, some effective, others less so. When illness comes, as it often does, you endure. If a cough becomes worse, if fever burns, sores rise on the skin, there's little to be done. And if plague comes, it comes like fog and vanishes just as quickly, if you understand it, if you survive it. And most bury their dead with hurried prayers and fearful hands. Dreams and resignation, you do not dream of escape. You may never travel more than a few miles from the village where you were born. The cities are far and filled with strange tongues. The forest is deep and rumored to hold wolves and worse, and the roads are rough, bandits known to lie in wait. So you stay, and you live, and you labor. Your joys are quiet. One's harvest festivals, a child's laugh, the scent of baking bread on a good day. But life is hard. It is repetitive. It is seldom fair. Still, you wake each morning, you tie your boots, and you return to the fields, because that is what has always been done. Picture a small village in northeastern France, a place not unlike the one we just left. Quiet, worn by weather, distant from power. The air is filled with the scent of livestock, smoke, and tilled earth. Somewhere in a modest home, a girl is sewing linen or kneeling in prayer. Her name is Jean. You might know her as Joan of Arc. Her story begins softly, and it ends with silence and flame. A village girl, Joan was born around 1412 in the village in the Duchy of Barnier, the edge of shifting territories in eastern France. Her parents were peasants, respectable but poor. They owned a small farm, and Joan would have spent her days helping her mother with housework, caring for animals, and listening to mass in the local church. There is no evidence she could read or write, but by all accounts, she was pious, serious, and unusually sensitive to matters of faith. Her world was shaped by war. For nearly a century, France and England had been locked in intermittent conflict, the war we now call the 100 Years' War. Towns changed hands. Villages were burned. Loyalties shifted like wind. Remained loyal to the French crown, even as nearby regions were overrun or allied with the English-backed Duke of Burgundy. Joan would have grown up hearing stories of defeat, betrayal, and heavenly deliverance. The voices began at the age of 13. Joan began to speak of visions. She claimed that saints had appeared to her, first St. Michael, and St. Catherine, and St. Margaret, telling her that she had been chosen by God. Their message was direct and startling. She was to save France. She was to lead the Dauphin Charles to the throne, and she was to drive out the English. These visions came not as commands, but as persistent truths. She heard them often. She believed them completely. Eventually, so would others. Seeking the Dauphin at just 17, Joan set out to meet the Dauphin to the French throne, but still uncrowned and uncertain of his support. It took persistence and political maneuvering to gain an audience. But somehow, against all odds, she was granted one. And when she stood before Charles, something remarkable happened. She is said to have identified him in disguise, to have spoken of private matters she could not have known, to have impressed him not with eloquence, but with conviction. He sent her to Poitiers for examination by a panel of theologians. Their verdict: she was neither heretic nor witch, just a simple girl with extraordinary belief. They approved. Armor and war. Joan was granted armor, a sword, and a banner white, marked with the names of Jesus and Mary. She led troops to the siege of a critical battle in 1429. Though not a trained commander, she inspired the troops. She rode at the front. She carried no weapon, only her banner. And within days, the siege was lifted. More victories followed. French morale surged, and soon the Dauphin was crowned Charles VII. With Joan at his side in the cathedral at Reims, her mission, in one sense, was complete. But politics are never so simple. Betrayal and capture after Charles's coronation, Joan's influence began to wane. Her continued military activity led her to where she was captured by Burgundian forces in 1430. Rather than ransom, hers was common for noble prisoners. Her captors sold her to the English. The French court did not intervene. Charles offered no aid. Joan was imprisoned in Rouen, held in chains, and brought before an ecclesiastical court. Her trial was not a fair one. Trial and execution, the trial of Joan of Arc, lasted months. She was interrogated repeatedly, often without legal counsel, often in secret. The charges were complex and shifting: heresy, witchcraft, cross-dressing, a reference to her male military attire. But at its heart, the trial was political. The English sought to undermine her legitimacy, and by extension, that of Charles VII. Joan held firm, even under pressure. She insisted her voices were divine. She refused to betray her visions. Eventually, she signed a confession under duress, but soon after, recanted. This gave her enemies the excuse they needed. In May of 1431, at the age of 19, Joan was condemned to death. She was burned at the stake in the marketplace of Rouen. Witnesses say she died calling the name of God. Redemption and memory. 25 years later, the verdict was reversed. A posthumous trial declared her innocent, her execution a grave injustice. Centuries passed. Her story grew. In 1920, Joan was canonized as a saint by the Catholic Church. Today, she is remembered as a hero, a martyr, and a symbol of courage and faith. But in her own time, she was a contradiction. A peasant girl leading armies, mystic navigating politics, a faithful servant caught between belief and power. Imagine yourself seated at a wooden table, its surface polished smooth by years of use. A roll of parchment lies unrolled before you, its surface pale and soft like thickened skin. You dip a fine brush into gold leaf glue, and with hands steady from repetition, you begin to trace the outline of a letter shaped like a dragon's tail. This is the silent world of manuscript illumination, a world that unfolded in monasteries, workshops, and urban studios across medieval France and beyond. A world where books were rare, precious, and handmade. It's one a labor of months, even years. And a world where images bright, strange, and deeply symbolic brought sacred texts to life. Origins. From Rome to Scriptoria before the printing press, every book was made by hand. The practice of illuminated manuscripts, texts decorated with painted initials. Borders and illustrations emerged from the late Roman world, evolving through the early Christian era. By the time of the Carolingian Renaissance in the 8th and 9th centuries, monasteries across Europe had established scriptoria-dedicated rooms for the copying of texts. Illumination, from the Latin illuminar, meaning to light up, referred not just to gold and silver leaf, but to the idea of enlightening the reader's mind. These books were not simply read, they were contemplated. The process. From skin to scripture, let's follow the process from start to finish. 1. Preparing the parchment. Most manuscripts were written on vellum or parchment, calf, goat, or sheepskin. The hides were soaked, scraped clean, stretched on frames, and dried under tension. The result was a durable, smooth, surface-soft ivory in tone. 2. Ruling the pages. Scribes used a stylus or lead point to draw horizontal lines, sometimes with vertical guides to organize the text. Margins were measured precisely, no inch wasted. 3. Writing the text with reed or quill in hand. Scribes dipped ink made from oak galls and iron salts, writing slowly and steadily. Errors could be scraped away gently with a knife, but only so many times before the page wore thin. 4. Adding decoration. Illuminators often, separate from scribes, added initials, borders, and miniatures. Some books featured full-page images. Others just tiny scenes nestled inside capital letters. 5. Applying gold leaf. Gold was laid with gum, Arabic, or glaire, pressed gently onto the page, then burnished with a smooth stone. The result: a shimmering surface that caught the candlelight as the reader turned the page. The artists behind the work. Though we often associate illuminated manuscripts with monks, many were made by professional lay artists, especially in later medieval France. In cities like Paris, Tours, and Avignon, manuscript production became a thriving trade. Women sometimes worked as illuminators, especially within family studios. And while some manuscripts bore the names of their scribes or patrons, most artists remained anonymous. They left no signature, only images vivid and strange that continued to speak across the centuries. Styles and subjects illuminations varied by purpose and period. Religious texts like psalters, gospels, and books of hours were the most common. Their pages were filled with miniatures of saints and biblical scenes, marginalia, including animals, jesters, and bizarre hybrid creatures, decorated initials, letters that curled into vines. Faces, even castles, but secular books too were illuminated. Histories, with knights in colorful armor, bestiaries, filled with lions, unicorns, and dragons, astrological guides, mapping the heavens in gold and blue. Each page was a canvas. Each margin, an invitation to imagine. Hidden messages and curious creatures, some illuminations were deeply symbolic. Others were playful, even subversive. Margins might feature snails in armor, battling knights, rabbits hunting humans, inverting the natural order, clerics riding geese, poking fun at church authority. Scholars still debate the meanings of these images. Were they inside jokes, moral lessons, mere decoration? No one is quite sure. But they add texture to our understanding of medieval minds, both devout and mischievous. Surviving examples, though many medieval books have been lost to time, destroyed in fires, floods, or reformations, thousands survive in libraries and museums. Among the most famous, the Riches du Duc de Berry, a lavish book of hours from 15th century France, is filled with scenes of daily life and cosmic grandeur. The Book of Kells, though Irish in origin, its intricate decoration influenced artists across Europe. The Grands Chroniques de France, a royal history adorned with detailed battle scenes and coronations, each one a window into a vanished world. A gentle ending, and so the candle burns low. The brush is rinsed, the gold leaf folded away, and the manuscriptic last page, now complete, is closed gently and bound in leather. These books were not mass-produced. They were personal and powerful, a record of belief, of wonder, of patient labor. They were made slowly for a world that moved slowly. And now, centuries later, they still invite us to pause, to look closely, to read quietly. Imagine yourself awakening, not on straw, but on a raised bedite's wooden frame, creaking, its mattress filled with feathers or wool, layered in linen sheets. The ceiling above you is dark timber, the walls are thick stone, hung with woven tapestries to soften the cold and muffle sound. A small fire has burned low in the hearth. A servant has already stirred it back to life. You are a feudal lord. And though your life is free from the back-breaking labor of peasants, it is not without structure or stress. Morning. Responsibility before leisure. Your day begins, not with leisure, but with obligation. Before you break your fast, a steward approaches with a list. Who owes you rent? Who has requested judgment in a dispute? Which walls need repairing? How much grain is stored? And whether the local priest has sent word regarding the bishop's visit. A lord in medieval France is not simply a landowner. He is a legal authority, a military protector, a tax collector, and the symbolic father of all who labor under his protection. Each day involves some mixture of management, oversight, and ceremonial presence. You may settle disputes between villagers, inspect fields, receive emissaries from neighboring estates, or hold court in a wooden hall seated beneath the carved beam of your family crest. Your word, within these walls and fields, is law. Meals and manners: breakfast is simple. Bread, cheese, and a cup of ale or wine. More substantial meals come later. The midday meal often, the largest, might be served in the great hall. Trenchers of coarse bread hold salted meats, stewed vegetables, and pottages thick with barley. You do not serve yourself. Pages and servants attend, offering cloths to wipe your hands and knives for carving. The etiquette is formal, even at home. To eat with fingers is not shameful. Everyone does, but to spill, to speak out of turn, or to fail to offer thanks is noticed. State business. Much of your time is spent reviewing accounts, tallies of produce, livestock, dues, and tithes. Your bailiff manages the finer details, but you oversee the whole. Occasionally you tour the estate, walking the edges of a field, inspecting the mill, or visiting the village forge. Though you do not plow or thresh, your livelihood depends on those who do. Your productivity is your income. Their loyalty is your stability. Military duty and training: you are a vassal, likely beholden to a higher lord or perhaps to the king himself. You owe military service, and you must keep men trained and ready. You do not train with them often. But occasionally you observe drills in the outer yard. You inspect their arms. You ensure that castle's stores contain arrows, pitch, and oil. And you maintain your own suit of armor, though it may hang unused for years. War is not constant, but its possibility always lingers. Family and legacy: you may have a wife, chosen by arrangement, not romance. She manages the household staff, and likely oversees the stillroom where herbs are dried and remedies made. Your children are raised to serve the family's future. Sons may be trained for knighthood or scholarship. Daughters may be taught embroidery, manners, and the sacred texts, preparing them for marriage or a religious house. Your estate will pass to one of them, and so everything you do, every tax collected, every field enclosed, every favor owed, is done with legacy in mind. Leisure and entertainment, but not all is duty. There are moments of music, hunting, and conversation. On occasion, a minstrel visits, singing songs of Charlemagne or Roland. There may be feasts on saints' days, with roasted fowl, spiced wine, and bright fabrics on display. You do not dance often, perhaps in youth you did, but you still enjoy the music. The hunt is your truest leisure. A day spent on horseback, hawk on wrist, winding through wooded paths with favored companions, and in the evening, a slow return. The dogs panting at your feet, the fire warm, the wine poured. Nightfall and reflection: as night deepens, the manor grows still. The servants extinguish torches in the outer halls. The kitchen's cool, the chapel candle burns low. You retire to your chamber. The bed, though high and sturdy, creaks with your weight, and the silence settles like snow. There are worries, of course: drought, war, betrayal. But here, for a moment, all is ordered. The estate breathes with your rhythm. Your people sleep. You guardian of this tiny domain, close your eyes. Imagine, if you will, that you wake before the sun. The sound that stirs you is not a rooster's crow, but the hollow tapping of a wooden clapper echoing through the alleyways. This is the night watchman, ending his rounds, letting the city know that nothing burned, and that the morning is safe for now. You rise slowly, brushing aside your mosquito net. The room is barely wider than your outstretched arms. Tatami mats cover the floor. Above you, wooden beams creak softly as your neighbor shifts in the room overhead. Your home, like nearly all in Edo, is made of wood and paper. It is light, dry, and highly flammable. You sleep knowing that a single ember, a cooking fire left unattended, could burn the entire block. This is the daily anxiety of Edo, the largest city in the world at its peak, where over 1 million people live shoulder to shoulder. And very few of them, very few of you, have any privacy. The structure of a crowded city. Edo is laid out with purpose, the product of both imperial vision and improvisational growth. There are grand areas reserved for the samurai class, wide and spacious, their compounds quiet behind white walls. But for most, life happens in tight communal rows called Nagaya longhouses. Here your room may be 6 tatami mats in size, barely enough to store your futon, a low chest, and a brazier for heat in the winter. The shared latrine lies at the back of the alley. Water is drawn from a communal well, and news is not redid as heard. From the vegetable seller calling prices, from the town crier reporting laws, from gossip shared over washing basins. You walk to the shared latrine used by dozens, sometimes hundreds of people. Night soil and urban cleanliness. Now imagine yourself stepping outside to relieve yourself. Yet Edo, for all its crowding, is not filthy. Why? Because every bit of waste, every bucket of night soil is collected, measured, and sold. Farmers arrive with carts in the morning, purchasing the contents for use as fertilizer. Entire professions exist solely to manage this system. And so oddly, the very thing that threatens sanitation in most cities becomes, in Edo, an economic good. Your waste has value. And so it is respected, in its way. Fire, the constant threat, but cleanliness is only part of the daily concern. The greatest enemy of Edo is fire. With so much wood, so much paper, and so many people packed into narrow lanes, even a spark is dangerous. Fires have names here, like earthquakes and storms. They are remembered, feared, and prepared for. Fire brigades organized by neighborhood or guild are brave, but rarely effective at stopping flames once they begin. Instead, they pull down homes to create breaks. Your house, if threatened, may be intentionally destroyed to save others. As a resident, you know this. You keep your belongings packed in a box for quick escape. And each year, you may rebuild. In this way, Edo is both stable and constantly reborn. Sumptuary laws and social uniformity now consider your clothing. You are not free to wear what you please. Your social class, your profession, and even your neighborhood may dictate what materials you can use, what colors are permitted, and how elaborate your patterns may be. Silk is reserved. Bright colors are frowned upon for commoners. Yet beneath the surface, these rules are often subverted. Tailors specialize in garments that appear plain from afar, but contain hidden flourishes, a lining of red silk, a pattern only visible in sunlight. This is Edo culture. Highly regulated, yet quietly playful. Everyone knows the rules. Everyone knows how to bend them. Street food and daily sounds as the day warms. You hear the vendors calling out their goods. Tofu, fresh tofu, soba noodles, hot and fast, grilled eel, sweet sauce, one cent a skewer. Food is everywhere in Edo. With little room for cooking at home, people eat in the street, seated on benches under paper umbrellas. Cooks specialize in 1 or 2 dishes made fresh, sold fast, and eaten quickly. The rhythm of the city is marked not by clocks, but by these sounds. The click of geta sandals on wooden boards, the cry of crows over the river. The faint hum of koto strings from a nearby home. Each street corner is a blend of sound, smell, and motion. Daily entertainment and escapism evenings are short. Fire danger grows with every lantern lit. But before night falls, some find their way to theaters, where kabuki performances dazzle and disturb with exaggerated gestures and elaborate wigs. Others visit tea houses, where women trained in music and conversation offer company, not companionship, but presence. And some simply sit outside their homes, chatting with neighbors, watching the city dim into its paper-thin walls and quiet courtyards. Nightfall in the wooden city, and now, imagine yourself returning home. The air is thick with the scent of grilled fish and distant river mist. Your home, though small, is warm from the brazier. You unroll your futon and listen for the clappers once more. Edo sleeps uneasily, always alert to fire, always adapting to change, always crowded, always alive. The year is 1701, and Edo is stable, perhaps too stable. The shogunate has ruled peacefully for decades. Violence is no longer the daily business of the samurai. Instead, they serve as bureaucrats, guards, and administrators, men of the sword, now bound by paperwork and protocol. But protocol in Tokugawa Japan is everything, and a single breach can collapse a life. The incident at Edo Castle. We begin with Asano Naganori, a daimyo feudal lord, young and proud, perhaps inexperienced. He is summoned to Edo Castle, tasked with preparing a reception for envoys from the imperial court in Kyoto. This is a high honor,
Ow!
but also a burden one, heavy with etiquette. To assist him, the shogunate assigns an older court official, Kira Yoshinaka. Kira is a master of protocol and a man known for expecting gifts bribes, some whisper. Asano, perhaps idealistic, perhaps simply unaware, gives no such offering. Kira insulted, humiliates him in front of others. Day after day, Kira criticizes. The tone grows sharper, the snubs more public. And then in a hallway within Edo Castle, something unthinkable happens. Asano draws his short sword and attacks Kira. He wounds him, but does not kill him. Guards intervene. The damage is done. The consequences. Swift and absolute to draw a weapon within the shogun's castle is a grave crime. To shed blood, they're even worse. That same day, without trial, Asano is ordered to commit seppuku ritual suicide. His lands are confiscated. His retainers become ronin masterless samurai, stripped of purpose and pay. Kira, though wounded, is spared any punishment. The ronin weight among Asano's former retainers is Jishi Yoshio, a senior counselor. He gathers the others once more than 300 and speaks carefully. To avenge Asano openly would be rebellion. To accept his death without protest would be dishonor. So they choose a third path, silence. They scatter. Some take on new trades. Jishi moves to Kyoto and begins to drink, carousing in public, pretending to abandon his code. All the while they wait. For nearly 2 years, the ronin keep their intentions hidden. They observe Kira, study his home, note the guards, the gates, the times of day. They wait for complacency. And then on a cold December night in 1702, they strike. The attack. The assault on Kira's mansion is swift and deliberate. Each ronin knows his role. They enter from 2 directions. Guards are bound, not killed when possible. Servants are spared. They search the house for nearly 2 hours before they find Kira, hidden in a storage shed. He is offered the sword and the chance to die by his own hand. He refuses. Jishi executes him with a single blow. They wash his head and carry it respectfully to the grave of Asano Naganor. And then they surrender. The aftermath. Law versus honor now. The shogunate faces a dilemma. The ronin have broken the law murder, premeditated and coordinated. But they have also embodied Bushido, the samurai code. Loyalty, courage, sacrifice. Punishing them might anger the public. Pardoning them might weaken the law. So the shogunate chooses a middle path. They are permitted to die with dignity seppuku, not execution. Their graves are placed beside Asano's. Their story becomes legend. Myth, memory, and meaning over the years, plays are written. Puppets and actors reenact the tale, sometimes altered, sometimes veiled to avoid censorship. The story resonates deeply, not because it is clean, but because it is contradictory. Were the ronin heroes or criminals? Was their loyalty noble or self-serving? Did they uphold justice or simply cling to vengeance? There is no definitive answer. And perhaps in Edo, that was the point. Gentle reflection as you reflect on their story. Consider the silence between actions, the waiting, the stillness, the years spent walking past neighbors with secrets in their sleeves, the price of obedience, and the quiet burden of loyalty in a world of strict lines and unreadable rules. The tale of the 47 ronin is not a fable. It is not clean nor resolved. Imagine yourself walking along the Sumida River. Sometime in the early 1800s, the spring air is damp and petals drift from cherry trees that lean low over the water. In a narrow shopfront, prints are hung with small wooden pegs. The colors are vivid, deep indigo, soft vermilion, yellow like candlelight. Each image tells a story, quiet, static, and carefully balanced. You pause before one. A courtesan, dressed in silk, holds a fan to her lips. Her gaze is ambiguous, neither invitation nor refusal. She stands before a screen decorated with cranes. It is not just a portrait. It is a world, and that is what ukiyo-e means. Pictures of the floating world. The process, with ink and layers, each of these prints begins not with a brush, but with a blade. The artist begins the design, sketching with ink on thin washi paper. This original image is called the hanshitai, That sketch is pasted face down onto a smooth cherry wood block. He chisels away the non-image areas, leaving raised lines of the drawing behind. Then comes the carver, who is not the artist, but an artisan in his own right. For each color, a separate block is carved. Some prints require 10 or more blocks, each precisely aligned using small registration marks called kento. Then comes the printer, who applies inks, sometimes damp, sometimes dry, and rubs the paper onto each block with a smooth pad of bamboo leaves called a baron. It is not painting. It is building through repetition. The final result is both delicate and reproducible. A single edition might include hundreds of copies, each slightly different, each touched by many hands. Famous subjects and recurring motifs, certain subjects appear again and again. The actor in full kabuki costume, caught mid-gesture. The courtesan, her kimono sleeves drifting like mist. The sumo wrestler, stocky and serene. Landscapes, most famously, Mount Fuji, snow and rain and dawn. Artists like Hokusai and Hiroshige create entire series, showing the mountain from different towns, different seasons, different moods. These are not realistic scenes. They're constructed dreams, fragments of a world refined into line and hue. Censorship and hidden meaning, but not all images are permitted. As Edo society grows more ordered, the shogunate imposes censorship not just of books, but of images. Officials inspect the sketches before printing. Scenes of political critique or social disorder are rejected. Even luxury is regulated. Too much gold, too much indulgence might draw suspicion. To adapt, artists become subtle. They embed critique in floral symbolism. They give actors the features of known officials. Let the viewer infer what cannot be shown. Some prints known as shunga, erotic art, flourish quietly. They are humorous, exaggerated, private, not obscene by the standards of the time, but always unspoken. Others depict commoners posing as aristocrats, or noble scenes painted with the faces of local shopkeepers, a quiet reversal of status, printed and sold for a coin. Distribution and ephemeral value despite their detail. These prints are not elite art. They are sold in bookshops, at festivals, by traveling vendors. They cost little less than a bowl of soba noodles. They are not made to last. And so, many are lost, to rain, to sun, to careless folding. Some are used as wrapping paper. Some line drawers, or are pasted to screens. Yet the ones that survive flattened, pressed between book pages or saved by collectors, become windows into a moment. A soft, lingering legacy as you imagine these images layered in silence and pressed by patient hands. Consider the nature of their beauty. They do not shout, they do not demand. They wait quietly to be seen. Their lines are gentle, their palettes soft, their meaning often hidden. In a world of clamor and confinement, ukiyo-e offered a glimpse of another rhythm, one of ephemerality, artistry, and careful control. Imagine waking before dawn in a mansion surrounded by high earthen walls. The sliding screens are closed. Servants move quietly along wooden corridors, barefoot, their sleeves brushing against lacquered beams. This is the world of a daimyo, a powerful feudal lord under the Tokugawa shogunate. And while his life may seem privileged, defined by silk, ceremony, and rice, stores it is also carefully watched. He is, in many ways, a noble prisoner. A web of control. During the Edo period, there were around 250 daimyo across Japan. Each ruled over a domain, some vast, some modest, but all were subject to the authority of the shogun, the military ruler based in Edo. To maintain power and peace, the shogunate imposed a system known as senkin-kari, or alternate attendance. Every other year, a daimyo was required to reside in Edo, leaving his family behind when he returned to his home province. This served two purposes. It drained his resources. Travel, lodging, and lavish processions were expensive. It kept his family in Edo as hostages, ensuring loyalty. So even in his own estate, surrounded by attendants and comfort, the daimyo lived under invisible constraints. A day of ceremonial rhythms. Life within the estate follows a strict rhythm. The daimyo awakens to morning rituals, bathing, dressing, breakfast, all attended by multiple retainers. Each robe is chosen with care. Even the angle of a bow has its own code. He may spend the morning receiving visitors, other nobles, envoys, or shogunal inspectors. Conversation is formal, gifts are exchanged. Tea is served slowly, in silence. If court duties require it, he will be carried to Edo Castle in Inoramono, a black lacquered palanquin, closed and still. He may pass merchants and street hawkers along the way, but he will not speak to them. A daimyo does not make eye contact with commoners. His power is immense, yet heavily scripted. K. Administration and oversight. Much of his day is spent not in leisure, but in paperwork. He oversees taxation from his home, domain grain assessments, peasant disputes, land records. His retainers bring reports. Scrolls are unrolled. Seals are pressed into red ink, then into paper. He is expected to fund not only his household, but also his processions, his mandatory years in Edo, and the upkeep of samurai retainers, who themselves may number in the hundreds. This economy of fealty is always under pressure. Even a wealthy domain can falter if a harvest fails, or a building burns, and the estate, with its garden ponds and polished verandas, must be maintained both for pride and for appearance. Meals and social order. Meals are taken quietly, often alone or with select retainers. Food is seasonal, beautifully prepared: grilled river fish, pickled vegetables, miso soup served in lacquered bowls. But it is not indulgence, it is ritual. The dishes are placed in precise order. The host lifts each bowl with both hands. Words are few. Entertaining guests involves poetry, incense games, or music played on the koto, but even leisure is conducted with formality. A daimyo might sit for hours beside a friend and speak only twice. Family and marriage, family life too, is not quite personal. Marriages are arranged for political reasons. Sons are raised to lead, daughters to marry strategically. Discretion is valued above emotion. Education is emphasized: Confucian texts, calligraphy, sword drills, etiquette. In this world, even a child's laughter is expected to be tempered. Night in the mansion. As evening falls, lamps are lit soft candlelight behind rice paper screens. Guards pace the outer walkways, spears in hand. The garden is still, save for the occasional frog or the rustle of a pine tree. The daimyo retires, not in a grand bedroom, but in a spare tatami room behind a screen. His futon is rolled out by attendants. Incense burns faintly nearby. Outside, the city of Edo carries on, noisy, bright, chaotic. But here inside these walls, everything is measured, everything is watched, a different kind of burden. Though wealth and rank insulate the daimyo from the struggles of peasants or artisans, he is not free. He is bound by status, by law, by tradition, and by the constant gaze of the shogunate. His world is one of abundance, but also constraint. He owns lands he must never overreach. He leads men he must not truly empower. He lives in a house he cannot fully call his own. His silence is no less heavy. And while his robes are finer than any farmer's, imagine yourself standing barefoot on a deck, slick with seawater and tar. Your clothes are stiff with salt. Your fingers blistered from pulling rope. You haven't seen land in weeks. And this, you are told, is the start of a grand adventure.
Nice.
The routine of hardship. You awakened before dawn to the sound of a bell. Sleep was shallow, cradled in a hammock below deck, surrounded by the soft groans of 100 men breathing in cramped, damp quarters. You dress quickly if you've ever removed your clothes at all. Laundry is rare on a ship. Water is precious. So is privacy. You report to your post. The morning air is cool, but heavy with brine. The sails need trimming. The barrels must be checked for leaks. The deck must be scrubbed with sand and seawater. There is no end to labor. Every hour brings a new task in coiling ropes, scrubbing the hull, watching for signs of land or threat. The rhythm of life aboard is dictated by bells, not clocks. Each watch is for hours. Sleep is broken. Time is abstract. The ship moves with the wind, or not at all. When the sea is calm, the stillness is maddening. When it's wild, you cling to the ropes and pray. Food and water, salt, spoilage, and scurvy. Your meals are simple and seldom pleasant. Each day brings a ration of hardtack, a biscuit baked until it is nearly stone. You soak it in water or ale, hoping to soften it. It is often infested with weevils. You do not mind. The weevils are protein. You may be given salted meat, cured until it's tough and sour. It's no longer clear whether it was once pork or beef. Fresh water is stored in barrels, but the barrels are old. The water quickly turns green, slimy, sometimes even riddled with algae. Still, you drink. There is no fruit, no vegetables. And after several weeks, your gums begin to ache and swell. This is scurvy, the sailor's silent companion. Company in quarters below deck. Space is a luxury you do not have. You share the air with rats. They are everywhere, nesting in ropes, chewing through flour sacks, scurrying in the dark. Instead, there is a simple plank at the stern with a rope to hold. There are no bathrooms, and the smell, especially below deck, is constant of sweat, rot, damp wood, and unwashed bodies. Privacy does not exist. You sleep shoulder to shoulder with strangers, and yet, after weeks, they are the only faces you know. Punishment and discipline order is essential. The sea does not forgive chaos. Captain's word is law. And for sailors who disobey, who steal, who fight, who fail in their duty, punishment is swift. The whip is common. So is confinement in chains. In rare cases, men are marooned, left behind on an island with little hope of rescue. Mutiny is feared more than any storm. And so discipline is enforced not with justice, but with fear. Weather and the unknown, the weather rules all. A storm can come without warning. The sails strain. The ship groans. Men climb high into the rigging, even as rain lashes and lightning cracks the sky. There are no forecasts. It's only experience and luck. Some voyages drift for months in calm. Windless water-watt sailors called the doldrums. Others face monstrous waves that toss the vessel like driftwood. Always, there is the unknown. Strange stars, unfamiliar tides, and stories of sea monsters, of ghost ships, of whirlpools that swallow everything. Whether you believe them or not, you still check the horizon. Hope wages, and the return you endure because of hope. Hope of payment, though many captains delay or deny it. Hope of landfall, of stepping on solid earth again, of real food, of clean water, of rest. But not all sailors return. Disease, shipwreck, combat, misnavigation. The sea is patient but never kind. Even those who survive may find themselves adrift again, hired for another voyage, another gamble. Because on land, there is little work. And at sea, there is always the promise, however faint, of reward. The year is 1519. Europe is restless with ambition. Spice trade cloves, nutmeg, cinnamons, more valuable than gold. Portugal controls the eastern routes around Africa, and Spain dreams of a western path to riches. Enter Ferdinand Magellan, a Portuguese mariner in Spanish service. This is the story of his voyage. Not a triumphant tale of discovery, but a slow, bitter odyssey of endurance, politics, and loss. A world yet to be circled at the dawn of the 16th century. The world map was more hope than fact. Sailors knew the earth was round, but how large and how navigable remained uncertain. The Americas had recently emerged on European charts, but their western edge was unmeasured. The Pacific Ocean had yet to be crossed. Spices from the east flowed through the Indian Ocean, but to reach them by sailing west, that was unproven. It was Magellan's ambition to prove it. He promised King Charles I of Spain that he could find a western passage to the Spice Islands, now part of modern Indonesia. The crown agreed. Ships were granted, men were recruited. And so, 5 vessels, the Trinidad, San Antonio, Victoria, and Santiago, set sail from Seville in September of 1519. A fleet leaves. Europe, the ships were small by modern standards, barely over 20 meters in length. Wooden, crowded, with no privacy and little comfort. About 270 men were aboard at the start. Sailors, soldiers, navigators, and priests. Many spoke different languages. Few knew what lay ahead. They sailed first to the Canary Islands, then along the coast of South America, searching for a way through. It was a voyage of uncertainty. Each harbor brought delay. Each bay offered false hope. The endless south winter set in as they reached the coast of what is now Argentina. There, Magellan chose to wait. The cold was sharp, the land barren. Supplies ran low. Discontent grew. In April 1523, Spanish captains mutinied. Magellan acted swiftly, decisively. 2 were executed, 1 was marooned. His authority was clear, but so was the cost. Trust had frayed. The voyage pressed on. Then came the long-sought passage, the narrow, winding strait at the southern tip of the continent. Treacherous waters, strong currents. They navigated it slowly, carefully, and at last they emerged into a vast, unknown ocean. Magellan named it the Pacific Peaceful, not for its calm, but in contrast to what they had just endured. But the peace was deceptive. The empty sea. Crossing the Pacific took 3 months. There were no islands, no ports, no fresh food. Sailors grew weak, many died of scurvy. The flesh of rats sold for half a ducat. Leather softened in seawater was boiled and eaten. Men sucked sawdust from the ship's boards. When they finally reached Guam in March 1521, they had been adrift for over 90 days. They had survived, but barely. The Philippines. Hospitality, then blood shortly after Guam, they reached the Philippines. Here at last was what they had longed for: fresh fruit, friendly people, land that welcomed their weary feet. Magellan, eager to solidify alliances and spread Christianity, became embroiled in local politics. On the island of Mactan, a local ruler named Lapu-Lapu refused Spanish demands. Magellan, with only a small party of men, went ashore to confront him. What followed was a brief, chaotic battle in the shallows. Magellan was struck by a bamboo spear, then overwhelmed. He died in the surf, abandoned by most of his men, who fled to the boats. He would never see Spain again. Homeward without him, the expedition, now leaderless, was broken. 2 ships were scuttled. 1 deserted. Only to remain Trinidad and Victoria. But Trinidad was captured by the Portuguese in the Moluccas. Only the Victoria, under the command of Juan Elcano, managed to limp home. She returned to Spain in September 1522, 3 years after departing, with only 18 survivors aboard. But they had done it. They had sailed around the world. Legacy of a fatal voyage, Magellan's dream cost him his life. It cost many others theirs, and yet it redrew the world. The Pacific was real and vast. The world was a globe you could encircle. Maps changed, trade routes shifted. The name Magellan would echo far beyond his grave. But for those on the voyage, glory was a concept best understood only from shore. For them it had been starvation, illness, betrayal, an endless sea. And yet they endured. The sea does not easily give back what it takes. For every ship that returns to port, there are others that vanish, swallowed by reefs, storm, or misjudged course. Their names fade from memory, their cargo forgotten, their crew never seen again. But sometimes, centuries later, the sea releases them. Bits of hull, broken ceramics, rusted tools, mute witnesses, 2 lives once lived and lost. Let us walk slowly through the deep, careful work of discovery and visit a few shipwrecks that time did not quite erase. The fate of the snow, our first stop, takes us to the southern coast of Africa. In 1794, a Portuguese slave ship named the Snow Paquette Africa departed from Mozambique Island, bound for Brazil. On board were more than 400 enslaved Africans. Barely days into its voyage, it struck a reef near Cape Town. The ship broke apart. Over 200 people drowned. The SO lay undisturbed for more than 2 centuries. Then, in 2015, marine archaeologists identified it. Fragments of shackles, wooden timbers, and copper fastenings were recovered, subtle, silent pieces of a grim past. This was no treasure ship. Its cargo had been human. And the wreck became a place of solemn memory, not of gold or glory. Discovering shipwrecks, a patient science. Marine archaeology is not fast work. Each expedition begins with maps, nautical charts, weather logs, old accounts. Researchers study currents, sediment patterns, and shifting coastlines. The seafloor is scanned using sonar and magnetometers, seeking unnatural shapes or metallic traces. Divers or remotely operated vehicles follow, photographing, mapping, and excavating. Sand is brushed away by hand. Every object is cataloged, every find is preserved. Some ships lie just meters below the surface, others rest hundreds of feet down. And in nearly all cases, the sea has claimed them: warped wood, shattered ceramics, disjointed bones. The goal is not salvage, but understanding. To reconstruct stories from scraps. To hear, quietly, what the ship might have once said. The wreck of the San off the coast of Colombia lies another wreck. legendary for its lost fortune. The San, a Spanish galleon, sank in 1708 during a naval battle with British ships. It was carrying enormous wealth, gold, silver, emeralds from South America back to Spain. Over 600 men perished with it. For centuries, the wreck was sought. Its location was confirmed in 2015, but its exact coordinates remain classified. Ownership is still debated. Spain, Colombia, and private companies all lay claim. The ship is now referred to as the Holy Grail of shipwrecks. But its value is not just material. Among the treasure are cannon engraved with dolphins, intricately carved wood, and personal belongings. A comb, a spoon, a boot. Objects that belonged to real people, now long gone. Ship in the desert. Not all wrecks are beneath the sea. In the Namib Desert, near the coast of modern-day Namibia, a Portuguese ship was discovered buried in sand, not water. The Bomb Jesus sank around 1533, one of the earliest European vessels lost in southern Africa. It was only uncovered by accident in 2008 during mining operations. Inside the wreck were thousands of Spanish and Portuguese coins, navigational instruments, and ivory tusks. There were also cannonballs and a few fragile human bones. Here, in a place where no waves now reach, the sea's memory lingers. What wrecks teach us: shipwrecks offer more than tragedy. They reveal the global connections of the past, trade routes, colonial ambitions, cultural exchanges. They show the technologies used, how ships were built, steered, and stocked. They uncovered lives otherwise lost: anonymous sailors, enslaved people, cooks, navigators, children. Each wreck is a snapshot of a moment frozen in salt and silence, and every discovery is a balance between science and story, memory and mystery. In the age when ships pushed past the edges of known maps, not all the work of empire happened at sea. For every sailor sunburnt on deck, there was another man seated at a desk in Madrid. And for the naval officer stationed in the Spanish court, the burden of empire came wrapped in lace and ink. This was a different kind of hardship, one of bureaucracy, status, and careful performance. Let us walk gently into this polished, gilded world and glimpse the rhythms of those who never set sail, but whose signature sent thousands across oceans. The rhythm of a courtly day. Imagine yourself waking just before dawn. Your room is narrow but elegant. The shutters creak open to the sound of hooves in the cobbled courtyard below. A servant stokes the coals in the brazier. The air still smells faintly of beeswax and old linen. You dress slowly. Carefully white stockings, pressed linen shirt, waistcoat stiff with embroidery, buckled shoes, perhaps a slim sword at the side, more symbolic than useful. A powdered wig is brushed out. You step into the hall, nodding to others as you pass. Eyes note every gesture. The Royal Palace of Madrid, or earlier still, the halls of the is a place of shadows and ceremony. The life of a court naval officer is neither fast nor free. It is slow, predictable, and flexibly formal. Duties without danger. Your morning might begin with correspondence, dozens of letters in curling script sealed in red wax. You write reports about ship movements, trade route recommendations, requests for repairs. You issue orders to captains you've never met, bound for ports you will never see, or maps to review, budgets to approve. Perhaps today you debate the construction of a new dry dock. Your authority is significant but tightly leashed. You do not decide war or peace, but you influence their gears. And the king's ministers watch carefully. Behind every decision lies risk. Spend too much, you're accused of waste. Spend too little, ships rot at anchor. And then there is the hierarchy. You are not a nobleman born, but you serve among them. Pageantry of power, a misplaced word, an untimely arrival, a slightly wrinkled colloquy of these might earn rebuke. The court life is also performance. You might dine beside a viscount, or remain standing entirely, depending on recent favor. There are audiences with ministers, where every phrase must be weighed. There are banquets, where rank determines your chair. Conversations are formal. Laughter is cautious. One eye is always on the balance of power between nobles, between factions, between tradition and change, and beneath the surface. The constant calculation. Who is rising? Who is falling? controls the next voyage of colonial importance. Who gets credit hand? Who, if things go poorly, takes the blame? Your uniform is pristine, your boots polished, but your mind is always working. Evenings in the court as the day ends, the palace grows quiet. Candles are lit in the long galleries. Couriers shuffle along the halls with folded orders. You may join a small salon music played on the harpsichord, a recitation of verse, or quiet conversation over warmed wine. But your mind remains on duty. You think of the ships still at sea, the names of officers you approved, the cargo expected in a month weather holds if pirates do not intercept, if mutiny is avoided. And you wonder, will they write to you? Will their ships return? You might sleep lightly in a bed of carved oak, while men on the other side of the world toss on hammocks in the dark below decks. The burden of command is quiet, but it is heavy. Life of the tethered elite, you live in comfort. You are respected. But you are also watched, controlled. Every advancement must be earned, every misstep punished. You are not at sea, but you are not free either. You serve a crown that expands ever outward. And your world, though finely dressed, is confined by its walls. This, too, was the life of the Age of Discovery. Not one of salt and storm, but of parchment, power, and polished shoes, pacing measured marble steps. Imagine it's late in the day. The sky is wide and pale, washed in the flat orange of a desert evening. Your feet are sore. Your robe clings to you with sweat and grit. Your camel, muttering and belligerent, has not stopped complaining since morning. And now, finally, just visible on the horizon, is salvation. A rectangle of thick stone walls, low and square against the sand. A caravanserai. A roadside inn for traders, pilgrims, scholars, and wanderers, a resting post scattered across the roads of Persia, from Anatolia to the Oxus River. But make no mistake, this is no luxurious oasis. The arrival as you draw near, the gates stand open, heavy wooden beams reinforced with iron studs, worn smooth from years of use. A guard half asleep waves you in. Inside, noise, dust, and the sharp scent of dung and boiled tea. Camels bellow from their tethered stations. Merchants argue over coin. Traveling musician softly plucks a stringed instrument near the far wall. You are exhausted, and you have tasks to complete before you can rest. Life on the road travel along the Silk Road is slow and unforgiving. Whether crossing Iran's central plateau or winding through mountain passes near Khorasan, you are at the mercy of heat, thirst, and human error. The sun dries everything it touches. You carry water and stretched animal skins that grow warm by midday. Food is flat, bland, and dry stale bread, pickled vegetables, a few hard olives. Even your money must be protected. Coin purses are stitched into your clothes. Some sew silver into their belts. Others keep letters of credita, promise from one merchant house to another. And over everything, the constant worry of bandits, customs, taxes, or sick animals. When the caravanserai appears on the horizon, it is welcome. But it is also work. Once your animals are watered and grain is purchased from the warden, you make your way to your quarters. They are shared unless you are wealthy. A long, narrow room of stone, lined with raised sleeping platforms covered in thin mats. The smell here is dense. Sweat, mold, oil, smoke. Perhaps mildew from the last rainy week. You stake out your space with a cloth bundle. There is little privacy, just the soft grumble of strangers rearranging their things. If you are lucky, someone has brought dates. If you are luckier still, someone shares. Supper and smoke in the center courtyard. Someone boils water. You are allowed to cook over the communal fire. Tea is strong and bitter. Lentils bubble in a dented copper pot. Another traveler sells dried fruit in handfuls, shriveled apricots and sour pomegranate peels. Later, a few men pass around a long pipe. They speak slowly in Persian with accents that hint at the far west or deep south. You nod, sip your tea, and count your coin again. The tax collector is stationed near the gate. You pass 3 checkpoints today. You'll see 4 more before the week is out. And each one wants a different ledger, a different stamp, different bribe. The uninvited guests, you lie down on your mat. The walls creak in the wind. A scorpion skitters across the stone outside. You tuck your belongings under your sleeping roll. The air is thick and still. In the dark, you hear the quiet rustle of mice, or perhaps worse, not for light, but to scare off things that bite. Most travelers carry their own oil lamp. The lice, though, are inevitable. Most travelers leave with more than they arrived. Still, there is something steadying about the quiet, rhythmic snoring of 20 strangers. Something human, even comforting in this shared exhaustion. The morning comes early before sunrise. The courtyard stirs, wheels creak. A pot crashes. Someone yells softly at a stubborn donkey. Your body aches. You repack your things, refill your flasks, buy more dried grain than you think you'll need, because someone always needs it more. And then, wrapped in shawls and dust, you step back into the pale desert morning. Another day, another road, another long walk, to another stone box in the sand. Picture, if you will, a vast land stretched between mountain and desert, where rivers slice through plains of golden soil, and people speak in dozens of tongues. It is the 6th century BCE, and the land we now call Iran is a patchwork of kingdoms, satrapies, and cities, each with their own kings, customs, and gods. Into this landscape, quiet and scattered, rises a man whose name would echo long after empires fell, Cyrus. Known in history as Cyrus the Great. But tonight, we will not tell his story with the trumpet blasts of conquest. We will trace it with gentle footsteps. Through soft sand and fading clay tablets, quiet beginning Cyrus is born, it is said, in the land of Anshan, a part of Elam in southwestern Persia. Though historians debate the precise details, the stories, of course, came later. Greek writers would speak of a child hidden in the hills, raised in secret to avoid a king's wrath, of divine portents and shepherds. But these tales, charming as they are, tell us more about legend than the man himself. What we do know is this: Cyrus began as a local ruler, perhaps a vassal king under the Median Empire, and in time, he would rise to overthrow the Medes and unite a people not through terror or destruction, but through something more deliberate, through organization, diplomacy, and law. The Persian method the empire Cyrus built was vast, but it did not grow through scorched earth. He was methodical. Where others imposed, Cyrus absorbed. He respected the languages and religions of the lands he conquered. He allowed local customs to flourish, and instead of razing cities, he often restored them. When he conquered Babylon, he did not parade prisoners or destroy shrines. He walked into the city as a liberator. The clay cylinder known today as the Cyrus cylinder is often called the world's first Declaration of Human Rights, though scholars temper that with caution. Still, its words echo softly, with ideas of tolerance and restoration. It speaks of temples being rebuilt, or of displaced peoples returning home, of a king who claimed to serve the gods of many nations, not just his own. Foundations of empire, the Persian Empire under Cyrus was unlike those that came before. It stretched from the Aegean Sea to the Indus River, from Armenia to the Persian Gulf. He organized it through satrapies, administrative districts with local governors. He built roads, simple ones, but steady and well-guarded. He standardized coinage and taxation, and all of it required an army, not just of soldiers, but of scribes, engineers, translators, and builders. The empire did not hum with war. Drums it pulsed with paperwork. And beneath it all was the vision of a man who ruled not from behind high palace walls, but through letters, decrees, and order. The end and the tomb Cyrus met his end, not with a throne beneath him, but on a battlefield. He died, according to ancient sources, fighting a nomadic people known as the Massagetæ, led by a queen named Tamiris. Her story is told with poetic fire by Herodotus. Though how much is truth is uncertain, what matters more is that Cyrus's body was brought back to the city of Pasargadae, where a modest stone tomb was built, still standing today. 6 stepped layers of stone, topped by a small house-shaped chamber. No golden statue, no towering ziggurat, just a clean, quiet place set against the hills and sky. The Greek historian Arrian recorded a simple inscription that may have once adorned it. "O man, whoever you are and wherever you come from, for I know you will come. I am Cyrus, who won the Persians their empire. Do not envy me for this little earth that covers my body." Legacy and silence, Cyrus the Great would be remembered by kings, prophets, and conquerors alike. The Hebrew Bible praises him as a deliverer. Alexander the Great visited his tomb in reverent silence. But Cyrus did not crave spectacle. He left no mythic epics, no dramatic last words. Only a legacy of order, restraint, and thoughtful rule. Of roads that led across mountains and policies that bound peoples together. In an age of iron and fire, he offered something different. Quiet power. And that, perhaps, is what made him truly great. Imagine this. A desert horizon stretching endlessly before you. Dry air tinged with salt and dust. It's a ghost of a camel's bell in the wind, long gone.
You're walking the ancient Silk Road, but there are no caravans now.
Only sand and stone. And the echo of a world that once bustled with life. Beneath your feet, lost cities sleep. Travel not in time, but in excavation. To the buried metropolises of Merv, Nishaper, and Samarkand, cities that once gleamed with tiled domes and merchant stalls, now faded to whispers beneath the dust. Let us begin with the city once known as the Pearl of the East, Merv, the city of 1,000 domes in what is now modern-day Turkmenistan. Lie the remnants of Merv, a city that once pulsed with silk traders, scholars, and kings. Its story stretches back thousands of years, from Achaemenid times to the Seljuk Empire. Under the Seljuks in the 11th and 12th centuries, Merv was likely the largest city in the world. Picture it. Thick mud brick walls stretching for miles. Water channels flowing from the Merjhab River. Libraries filled with manuscripts. Courtyards shaded with fruit trees. But Merv was not built of marble or permanence. It was a city of earth. And when the Mongols came in the 13th century, they left little standing. Archaeologists have uncovered layers of settlement. Each new ruler built over the bones of the old. Today, the site known as Kala marks the ancient core, a round citadel worn down like a loaf of bread by the wind. Merv is not one city, but many. Its story is one of layers, dust, and time. Nishaper. The potter's dream. Now let us drift further west, to the plains of northeastern Iran. Here, near the foot of the Banald Mountains, lay Nishaper city, famed for ceramics, poetry, and commerce. During the Islamic Golden Age, Nishaper was a cultural crossroads. Artists fired deep turquoise-glazed bowls in smoky kilns. Scribes copied Qurans in delicate calligraphy. Poets like Omar Khayyam once walked its streets. Archaeological digs in the 20th century revealed tangled neighborhoods and shattered pottery beneath the soil. Some tiles still bear floral motifs. Others offer verses in Kufic script, but like Merv Nishaper, to met tragedy, earthquakes, invasions, abandonment. Its name, meaning good news, is now spoken mostly in history books and museum plaques. A city of pigment and poetry, reduced to ceramic shards and foundations that barely rise above the weeds. Samarkand. The jewel that endured. Now let us turn eastward once more, to a city that did not vanish entirely. Samarkand in modern-day Uzbekistan remains alive, but its ancient heart. The Samarkand of the Silk Road is half memory, half restoration. It was the crown jewel of Tamerlane's empire, a city of blue domes, wide avenues, and towering madrasas. Yet long before Tamerlane, Samarkand was already ancient. Its earlier incarnation, Afrasiab, has been excavated north of the modern city. There, archaeologists found wall paintings, coins, and fragments of life from Sogdian scribes to Chinese embassies. The city was a node of ideas: Buddhism, Zoroastrianism, Islam. Caravans carrying jade, spices, stories. It shimmered not with gold, but with cosmopolitanism. Today, visitors see the grandeur of Registan Square, but buried beneath it lie centuries of forgotten walls and winding alleys. The past, like the tilework, peeks through in patterns. Echoes and sand, these cities remind us of something humbling. Greatness fades, stone erodes. Palaces fall to ruin. Libraries turn to ash or dust. And yet, under the feet of shepherds, beneath the wheels of jeeps, and hidden beneath vineyards and scrub, these cities persist. They wait for trowels and brushes, for satellites and sonar. They yield secrets slowly. A shard here, a coin there. Archaeology is not dramatic. It is a soft science, a discipline of patience, sifting, cataloging, and waiting. And what we learn from these ruins is not always a grand story, but 1,000 quiet ones, of broken teacups, of worn stairs, of ink faded from scrolls. Imagine, for a moment, you are waking in a place stitched together with silence and scent. The walls shimmer faintly with geometric tiles, blue and white, endlessly repeating. The morning light filters through carved latticework, casting a gentle pattern over cushions of silk and brocade. You are in Isfahan, capital of the Safavid Empire, and today you are invited, quietly and without fanfare, into the court of the Shah. Let us walk softly through this final chapter, where power is practiced in whispers, and where every motion, however slow, is deliberate. The setting: Isfahan and the Safavid world by the early 17th century. Under Shah Abbas the Great, Isfahan had been transformed into a masterpiece of urban vision. Wide boulevards stretched from palace to mosque. Bazaar stalls were shaded under intricate vaulted ceilings. And in the center, the Nakshe-Jahan Square, a plaza of breathtaking symmetry and civic pride. It was said that Isfahan was half the world, Isfahan Nesfa Jahan. But within this grand city sat another, more cloistered world: the royal court, with its gardens, halls, and carefully scripted daily life. The Shah's residence was part palace, part fortress, part stage. Everything was controlled scented water, posture, and phrase. And you, today, are an observer on the margins of that power. The morning. Rituals and reverence. Your day begins early. The Shah has already risen. He begins his day with private prayer, his whisper carried only by the courtyards. He is attended by silent aides, eunuchs, advisors, guards, all of whom know when to lower their eyes, when to step back into the shadow of a doorway. The morning progresses into courtly rituals. Petitions arrive, rolled scrolls carried by trusted intermediaries. A military officer from Tabriz requests a promotion. A merchant from Bandar Abbas asks for relief from import taxes. A poet from Herat submits verses praising the Shah's lineage. But none of these will be read immediately. First comes audience. It's a midday. Audiences and appearances. Imagine now you are standing near the outer walls of the Ali Kapu Palace. Inside, a chamber of mirrors and paintings stretches wide and echoing. Columns frame the space like trees, and through them, the Shah may appear, or he may not. Appearing before the Shah is not guaranteed. Petitioners may wait days, even weeks. But today, a small number of dignitaries are admitted. Foreign envoys from Mughal India, a Jesuit priest bearing gifts from the Portuguese, an Ottoman scholar carefully vetted. They bow, offer gifts, rugs, gems, spices, clocks. The Shah listens, expression unreadable. His reply, if given, is soft and formal. In the court, even silence is a language. You are not here for spectacle. You are here for presence. Presence is power. The afternoon, leisure, art, and discipline. As the sun reaches its highest point, the court shifts. The Shah may retire to the Cella Sotunda, palace of 40 columns. Its reflection in the garden pool doubles the number. There, in this shaded place, he might dine on saffron rice and pomegranate stew. Musicians may play gently. Poets may recite verses in Persian, elegant and slow. But court life is not all pleasure. Decisions are made here on campaigns, on marriage alliances, on taxation. The Shah's viziers, scribes, and court astrologers hover nearby, ever at the ready. Sometimes a misstep brings punishment. A word spoken too freely, a bribe discovered. Disfavor is never loud. It arrives in a pause, in a changed glance, in a reassignment to the provinces. In the court, one rises not through shouting, but through knowing when not to speak. The evening, reflection and ritual. As twilight falls across the domes and gardens of Isfahan, the court settles into a quieter rhythm. Incense is lit. Oil lamps glow faintly, casting golden circles on the tiled floors. The Shah retires again to private quarters. It is here that he may read. Study texts of theology, science, history. The Safavid rulers descended from Sufi mystics, often viewed kingship as a form of stewardship, not only power. Still, the duties of image persisted. Even when the Shah dined alone, Even when he walked among his inner courtyards, he remained a symbol, his gestures studied, his words remembered. In the stillness of the night, a poet might compose a quatrain, comparing the Shah to the moon. In another chamber, a painter might carefully apply gold leaf to a miniature portrait of today's audience. The court never truly sleeps, it waits. Final thoughts on the court. The Safavid court was not a place of indulgent relaxation, but of performance. A ballet of robes and regulations, a mirror held to empire. For those who lived inside its walls, nobles, guards, servants, scholars, life was both elevated and restrained. Luxury did not bring freedom. Its power did not guarantee ease. It was a world gilded with rules. And as you withdraw quietly from its echoing halls, stepping back into the warm night air of Isfahan, you may reflect that the court was not unlike the cities of the Silk Road, complex, beautiful, fragile. A system of appearances, held together by silk threads and unspoken understanding. Imagine waking before the first hint of sunrise, the air already warm, the breath of the desert curling across your skin. You rise from a mat on a dusty floor, your shoulders stiff, feet cracked from the previous day's relentless work.
Ow.
There is no question of whether you will go to the work site today. Your overseer waits, tally board in hand, ready to count heads and measure your daily labor. The blocks of stone will not move themselves. As you shuffle toward the banks of the Nile, you join hundreds of other men. Some farmers drafted during the off-season, some permanent laborers, some skilled masons who know how to smooth limestone with a copper chisel. Your breath mingles with theirs in the half-light, the smell of lentil stew still on your tongue from the breakfast you ate quickly. The journey to the construction site is a steady march. Sometimes across rough paths, sometimes along muddy canal edges where the water carries barges of stone from distant quarries. If you are unlucky, you will be assigned to unload those blocks today, swinging thick ropes that leave red welts across your palms, or dragging wooden sleds that grind across the desert's crust. With a groan that seems to echo your own, the overseer will not carry a whip, at least, not always. But his voice is enough to spur you on, reminding you of your quota, the blocks you must haul, the hours you must account for, the work you cannot leave unfinished. The sun climbs higher, its heat pressing against your skin until your linen kilt sticks to your body with sweat. Pause only long enough to gulp water from a clay jar shared among many hands, the liquid warm, tasting faintly of clay and river silt. There is no time to rest beyond that moment. The foreman counts again, his voice measuring your time like the ticks of a clock that no one yet invented. In the midday, the stone itself seems to radiate heat, burning your fingers as you guide it into place. A slip could crack a precious block, and then your pay might be docked. Mistakes are costly, not just to the overseer, but to the fragile chain of work on which a royal schedule depends. As the afternoon deepens, the slow rhythm of hammer on chisel continues, the air filled with dust that clings to your eyelashes and scrapes your throat raw. The taste of the lentil stew has long since faded, replaced by grit that seems to live behind your teeth. You work and work until the shadows lengthen and the overseer's voice calls a halt. Your hands throb, your back screams, and your legs threaten to fold beneath you. There is no celebration at day's end, just a quiet trudge back to your sleeping mat, the promise of another sunrise, another day of quotas and blocks and sweat. No one here dreams of glory. The Great Pyramid will carry the name of a king, not yours. But still, you do your task, because not doing it means hunger, or worse. Perhaps it is a strange kind of pride, to know that even your anonymous toil will hold up the stone bones of eternity. So rest now in your imagination, feeling the soft breeze off the river, cool at dusk as it rustles the reeds. Let your mind wander through this scene, where men and women once labored with only bare hands and patient endurance. And remember, the monuments that still stand today owe their impossible presence to the simplest, most exhausting work of countless forgotten builders under the Egyptian sun. As we leave behind the sunburnt shoulders and aching hands of the anonymous builders, let us now turn to a king whose name has echoed through centuries, Akhenaten. Imagine yourself stepping from the dust of the quarry into the strange, vivid light of a royal dream. Akhenaten was a pharaoh who broke nearly every rule, born as Amenhotep IV in the 14th century BC. He inherited a stable kingdom, rich in tradition, where gods were worshipped in forms so ancient they seemed woven into the stone itself. But Amenhotep was not satisfied with tradition, changed his name to Akhenaten, effective for the Atan, and elevated a single solar disk, the Atan above every other deity. No more statues with jackal heads or falcon wings. No more shrines to the comforting old gods. Akhenaten's world would revolve around a glowing disk of sunlight, a god without a face whose rays reached down with hands of light. Imagine what that felt like for the people of Egypt, whose ancestors had offered prayers to Osiris and Isis for countless centuries. They watched in uneasy silence as familiar statues were smashed, as temples were abandoned. And as a new city, Akhetaten, horizon of the Aten, rose from the desert almost overnight. Picture it. Whitewashed walls reflecting the desert glare, broad avenues running straight through brand new shrines, decorated with images of Akhenaten and his royal family basking in the Aten's warm rays. Everything in Akhenaten was designed to celebrate this one divine presence. And Akhenaten's family itself became almost holy in the eyes of their followers. Life there must have seemed at once thrilling and terrifying. Imagine the artists, pressed to invent new forms overnight, who painted Akhenaten with a strangely elongated face, narrow shoulders and wide hips, a look that broke with all earlier Egyptian ideals of kingly strength. Or think of the priests who once guided ancient rituals, now stripped of power, watching as their entire world vanished. For a few brief years, the city of Akhetaten thrived, filled with courtiers eager to please the new order, scribes learning new hymns, and laborers building palaces in heat that scorched their lungs. Akhenaten himself wrote hymns to the Aten, praising the sun's daily rebirth, as though he alone could interpret its message. But power built so quickly can also dissolve quickly. Beyond Akhetaten's bright walls, the rest of Egypt was growing restless. Military campaigns faltered, regional governors grumbled. People feared the old gods might take revenge for being cast aside. Then, almost as suddenly as it appeared, Akhetaten was abandoned. Akhenaten died, perhaps unexpectedly, and the priests of the old gods surged back to power, wiping away the Solar King's memory where they could. His city became a ghost town, its walls left to collapse under drifting sand, its once bright paintings fading in silence. Imagine wandering through its ruins, centuries later. Broken columns, fading images of a royal family long gone, and the fierce desert reclaiming everything. Archaeologists in the 19th century would marvel at the strange art, the experimental architecture, and the glimpses of a faith that burned brightly for a moment, then vanished almost without a trace. There is something haunting in the story of Akhenaten, as if you can feel the echo of a king who tried to change everything and who discovered in the end that even a pharaoh cannot rule over people's hearts forever. So rest a moment, letting the slow rhythm of this rise and fall drift across your mind like desert wind. When you are ready, we will leave the fallen city and journey onward to another mystery, the secrets still wrapped inside the mummified dead. Let us step away from the fading walls of Akhetaten and wander into another realm of wonder and mystery, the silent world of the Egyptian tomb. Here, beyond the reach of sunlight, the ancient dead slumber, wrapped and preserved, guarding secrets that even now continue to slip through our fingers. Imagine yourself descending into a cool, stone-cut chamber. The air heavy with the scent of ancient resins and faint dust. Your lamp flickers across painted walls, depicting sacred journeys through the underworld, where monstrous guardians and kindly gods alike stood ready to weigh a soul's worth. In the center of this quiet space lies a mummy, arms crossed, linen wound tightly, the features of the face faintly molded in a golden mask. For thousands of years, these carefully prepared bodies have fascinated and puzzled us. What did the embalmers know that we have still not fully recovered? The practice of mummification was at once practical and spiritual. Preserve the flesh so that the soul, the ka, the ba, all the complex parts of the Egyptian spirit could recognize its own body and return to it. Imagine the embalmers, their hands stained with natron and oil, carefully removing organs, placing them in painted jars guarded by animal-headed stoppers, while priests recited prayers to shield the soul from harm. But so many questions remain. Why were some mummies treated with more elaborate wrappings, more resins, more intricate amulets, while others were prepared in simpler ways? How exactly did these craftsmen learn just how to balance preservation with spiritual purity? Modern science is still working to trace the precise recipes of those ancient bombs, deciphering lists of rare resins brought across the known world. Imagine for a moment the layers of linen itself, hundreds of yards sometimes, each fold holding charms, each knot carrying a protective spell, each layer built up like the pages of a book whose language we only partly understand. And there, deep inside the body, carefully dried and perfumed, bearing quiet witness to a life long ended, but never fully forgotten. Mummies also speak to us through what is missing. Many were plundered in ancient times, stripped of their jewelry, or even burned for their supposed magical powers. Later in Europe, powdered mummy was sold as a strange medicine, reducing centuries of ritual to a gruesome dust. Yet even so, a surprising number survived, carried to museums, where researchers today peer inside them with X-rays and scanners, learning who they were, what they ate, and what diseases they carried. And there are still riddles. Some mummies show injuries, sword cuts, broken bones, or signs of strange poisons, offering hints of violence or mystery, but no clear explanation. Others bear tattoos, symbols whose meanings we are only beginning to unravel. A tattoo of a goddess, a pattern of protective eyes, reminding us that the body was a temple not only in life, but in death. As you picture these mysteries, imagine the soft rustle of linen, the faint scent of ancient myrrh, and the hush of a tomb sealed against the world, a place built to keep its stories safe, to shelter a soul on its journey, and perhaps to confound the living for all eternity. It is a gentle enigma, woven through countless generations, and even now, after so many centuries. The mummies of Egypt hold their silence more tightly than any lock or seal. And so, let us pause here, among the painted walls and still air, before we leave the tomb behind. When you are ready, we will step into a very different world, the grand and echoing palace of Ramesses the Great. And now, after the dry winds of desert tombs and the silence of mummies, allow yourself to cross the Nile once more, into the living, shimmering world of kings. Let us pass through sunlit gates, where guards in linen kilts stand motionless, and step inside the vast palace of Ramesses the Great. Imagine, if you will, an enormous complex, sprawling across acres of carefully leveled ground. Its walls painted in vivid reds and yellows, its massive doorways guarded by statues of the pharaoh himself, towering over those who entered. The floors are polished stone, cool underfoot, gleaming in the bright light that spills through open courtyards. Here the air smells of incense, frankincense and cedar burned in elaborate braziers, and of crushed lotus blossoms carried by attendants, who move in a quiet, steady rhythm. Within these walls, Ramesses ruled with absolute power. His word as final as the god's own. But the palace, for all its grandeur, was no idle pleasure house. It was a working seat of empire, where scribes bent over scrolls of papyrus, recording harvests, troop movements, and foreign tributes. Where ambassadors from distant lands waited patiently in shaded colonnades. For a moment of the king's attention, within the vast audience halls, you might hear the hush of petitions being read, the low voices of officials consulting on border disputes, or the measured tones of priests reciting blessings before a royal decree was given. Every moment in this palace carried layers of protocol, each action weighed against the traditions of hundreds of years of Egyptian rule. Imagine, too, the family of Ramesses moving through these same spaces. Wives dressed in fine pleated linen, their hair heavy with fragrant oils, their jewelry glittering with turquoise and lapis. Children with shaved heads save for a ceremonial braid, playing under the watchful eyes of nursemaids and tutors. At mealtimes, the palace would transform, long tables laid with baskets of fresh bread, roasted duck, honey-dipped fruits, and beer poured from tall ceramic jugs. Musicians would pluck gentle melodies on harps and lutes, filling the warm evening air with delicate song. Yet even at these feasts, there was a sense of formality, a constant awareness of rank and propriety, as though each bite, each sip, reinforced the king's divine place at the apex of the world. Beyond these rituals lay the endless demands of power, petitions to grant, punishments to oversee, foreign wars to plan, and temples to fund. Ramesses was as much a symbol as a man, and his palace a monument to that illusion of eternal order. Columns decorated with images of the pharaoh smiting enemies. Scenes of victory carved and painted again and again reminded all who entered that here. Within these walls, power was absolute. Yet for all its majesty, even this great house of kings was vulnerable. Floods, drought, and plague could reach it, just as they reached a farmer's hut. And the same winds that whistled across the desert could batter these stone walls, chipping away at their painted splendor over the centuries. Time, patient and unstoppable, worked its subtle changes here, just as it did across all of Egypt. So rest for a moment in these echoing colonnades, where voices of scribes and courtiers once mingled, and where the sandals of great kings wore soft paths into stone floors. Let your mind linger on the scent of incense, the golden glow of oil lamps, and the quiet knowledge that even the palace of Ramesses was, in its way, as fragile as any mud brick village, waiting for the future to claim it. And now, as we prepare to draw our historical voyage to a close, allow your breathing to settle, and your thoughts to drift, knowing we will gather all these impressions into a gentle conclusion that reflects on the journey we have made together. Imagine, if you will, the dawn on the Central Asian steppes. A pale, cold light spreading across an endless sea of dry grass. The ground is frozen hard beneath your felt boots, the wind cutting through the layers of sheepskin and wool you have wrapped around yourself for the night. It is a place with no walls, no hedges, only a horizon that stretches into a faraway blue, so wide it seems to swallow every hope or fear. Jagar. The round felt tent still smells faintly of smoke from last night's dung fire, the only warmth you could muster as temperatures dropped well below freezing. Outside, the horses, sheep, and goats begin to stir, their breaths steaming in the thin air, their bellies only half full after days of searching for withered grass beneath a crust of wind-blown snow. In these lands, there is no backup granary, no hidden store of barley or wheat. If your herd sickens, if a disease sweeps through, or wolves strike in the night, or a sudden blizzard covers the land in ice, there is no miracle to save you. You live on milk, on meat dried and tough as leather, and on whatever trade you can make with passing caravans. The rhythm of herding life is ceaseless. Each day you rise before the sun, walk out across the brittle grass to check your animals, repair broken harnesses, patch torn saddlebags, and worry over each lamb and foal, whose survival might mean your own next winter. The children help, of course. Small hands learning quickly, too, so felt. To gather dung for the stove, to ride out after strayed goats, before wolves or thieves can seize them. This is their school. The patient hardship of a land that respects no one's weakness. Your food is simple. Tea often thickened with rancid butter to ward off the chill. A stew made from boiled mutton bones, seasoned by the faintest pinch of salt, traded from distant merchants. And a hard dry cake of millet or barley when you are lucky enough to have flour. Imagine biting into that bread, your jaw working slowly against its density, chewing until the bland taste dissolves into the reassurance of simply being fed. Then another mouthful of mutton broth. The smell of boiled fat mixing with the ever-present scent of smoke that clings to your hair and clothes. Life here is a constant struggle against the cold, the emptiness, and the hunger. Yet in the evenings, you might gather in the Gare with family and neighbors, listening to an elder tell stories of a time when every family's herd was healthy and fat, when the grass grew tall, and when the ancestors themselves seemed to smile upon the land. Such memories, repeated in the soft hush of a night wind, bring a fragile kind of hope, like a spark that will burn through the next day's labor. And as you lie down on a felt mat, pulling heavy blankets around your shoulders, the silence is vast, broken only by the shuffling of hooves, or the mournful call of a wolf, far off in the darkness. You know the cold will return with the dawn, and you will rise once more, checking your animals, your children, and your own quietly beating heart in this place where even breathing can feel like a triumph. That is the rhythm of the Mongol herdsman's life. Hard, repetitive, yet woven through with determination. With stories and with a kind of quiet faith that the next spring might be kinder than this one. Now, dear listener, Let us turn our minds from the quiet hardships of herdsmen to the life of one who rose from their ranks, a boy who grew among these same wind-swept steppes, whose name would travel farther than any nomad's hoofbeats. His name was Temujin, though you may know him best as Genghis Khan. In the modern imagination, he is often pictured as a ruthless warlord, a relentless destroyer of cities. But there is more to him, far more, if you listen carefully and allow the dust to settle. Imagine him as a child, tugging at the sleeves of his mother in the tent, feeling hunger gnawing at him after their tribe abandoned them. Temujin's father had been poisoned by rivals, leaving the family to survive on scraps of fish and wild roots, harassed by other clans who refused to shelter them. This was no easy childhood. It was the schooling of hunger, exile, and suspicion. Yet, within Temujin, there was an unquiet determination. He learned how to bind alliances. First with a boyhood friend Jamuka, who would later turn against him. And then with powerful tribal leaders who saw something fierce but steady in his manner. He was no charming prince. He was quiet, cautious, observant. He watched how people moved in their tents, who listened to whom and who did not. Over the years, his following grew, promised loyalty to those who served him, and showed a kind of measured fairness, rare in a world of endless tribal raids. He took wives as custom allowed, yet still gave his first wife, Bert, a place of prominence. Respecting her counsel even when the world roiled around them. Imagine Temujin riding out across the steppe, his horse's hooves, striking a rhythm against the dry earth, his eyes scanning the horizon not for prey, but for allies, for rivals, for opportunities. My mind was an instrument tuned to survival, but also to something greater. The vision of a unified steppe. No longer torn by blood feuds and petty rivalries, when he at last declared himself Genghis Khan, the universal ruler. He had woven together dozens of feuding clans into a single, disciplined machine. No one had ever done this so fully, so resolutely. He used rewards for loyalty, brutal punishments for treachery, and a code of law, the Yasa, that applied to rich and poor alike. So long as they served the Khan's aims, his campaigns against neighboring kingdoms were devastating, yes, but they were also meticulously planned. Genghis Khan sent envoys, demanded tribute, and offered negotiation before the thunder of hooves fell upon cities and walls. It was a hard justice carried out with the certainty of a man who saw the steppe's endless struggle, reflected. In every fortress he conquered, in camp after battle, he was not known for wasteful celebration. He preferred quiet strategy, gathering his generals to discuss what had gone well, what needed correcting. He asked questions, listened, and remembered every slight, every kindness. His memory was a weapon as sharp as the curved sabers his warriors carried. Yet he was still human. He feared betrayal, kept close guards, and worried for his children, whether they could hold together the fragile unity he had built with so much pain. And he feared, as all men do, the slow approach of age of death, and of being forgotten by the very world he had tried to shape. So let your mind rest on that image of Genghis Khan in the pale evening light. Seated upon a simple carpet in his gair, his eyes soft for a moment, as he thought of Bert, of old friends, of the thousands of horsemen waiting beyond the fires. The conqueror was a father, a husband, survivor, a man who had once tasted hunger and vowed that no one would ever force that taste upon him again. In this, perhaps, we glimpse the hidden tenderness inside the legend, the quiet resolve that made him more than just a warlord. He was a strategist, a reformer, and above all, a step-born son who remade the world in the only image he knew. The endless horizon, answerable to no one but the wind. Settle your mind, dear listener, as we open a quiet, weathered manuscript filled with stories meant to be half-shared, half-hidden stories carried by riders and whispered in the felt-walled gairs long after the lamps were doused. This is the secret history of the Mongols, a curious, haunting text. Written perhaps only a generation after Genghis Khan's death, somewhere around the 13th century, it was not meant for foreigners to read. It was a book for the Mongols themselves, a book of memory, pride, shame, and explanation. No one is entirely certain who wrote it. Some suspect a scribe working under the Khan's heirs. Others imagine a collective voice of chroniclers trying to preserve the Mongol soul before it was swallowed by conquest. What is clear is that it reveals glimpses of Genghis Khan and his world with an intimacy no outsider could have invented. Within its pages, you find no soaring poetry, but a steady, matter-of-fact recounting of blood feuds, alliances, insults, and the slow growth of Temujin's destiny. There are quiet moments, the boy scolded by his mother for letting a fish slip away, or the night he first met Bert beneath a smoky lamp. You see him struggle against his brothers, resentful of his authority. Watch him narrowly escape death when rivals tried to drown him in a river. Again and again, the text repeats the rhythm of Mongol life. Horses, kinship, the fragile thread of loyalty. Temujin's successes were never guaranteed. In fact, the secret history reminds us how icily everything might have failed. It shows how he returned from defeat, how he begged for followers, how he outlasted even childhood bullies through a kind of quiet, unbreakable resolve. And yet there is myth in these lines as well. Genghis Khan's birth is described with signs in the sky, a clot of blood in his fist, omens of a man who would rise above all tribal quarrels. Whether these stories are true almost matters less than the feeling they evoke, that he was chosen, fated to lead, marked by something beyond human measure. In a calm voice, the text tells of battles, but often skips the gore. It focuses on where the horses went, who gave loyalty, who betrayed, and who remembered an oath made by a fire on a freezing night. There is a gentleness, too, in the way the chroniclers describe. Bert, Genghis's first and most beloved wife, reclaimed after being kidnapped, never dismissed from his heart. She reappears in the secret history not as a decoration, but as a partner, firmly part of his household, someone he could trust, in a world where trust was as thin as a hair in the wind. Centuries after it was written, the manuscript vanished from Mongol lands, kept alive only in a Chinese translation meant to teach court interpreters about the ways of these strange steppe warriors. From there, it slowly resurfaced, copied, preserved, until historians in the modern age recognized its power as a window into a vanished heartbeat. Reading the secret history of the Mongols today is like hearing a voice from across 800 years, a voice that does not boast, but records carefully. The small humiliations and the enormous triumphs of a people who refuse to be broken. It speaks of rough felt tents, bowstrings drying by the fires, sons who wandered too far, bartered in marriage to strengthen a fragile alliance. It reminds us, gently, that Mongol greatness grew not from castles or cathedrals, but from the raw courage of families who depended on their herds, their horses, and their endless will to survive where few dared to live. Let these stories, wrapped in the faded leather of memory, rest beside you for now, like the soft rustle of a tent flap at night. They do not ask you to believe every word, but simply to feel them, to taste the wind, to smell the wood smoke, and to remember that even the greatest conquerors came from nothing more than a boy who was hungry, and a family who refused to vanish. Settle in again, dear listener, as we move from the wind-blown steppes into a world of unexpected luxury, ritual, and uneasy order. Imagine yourself stepping inside the great court of the Khans, beneath a roof of layered felt and silk, ringed with hangings of golden cloth. The air thick with the mingled scents of roasted mutton, fermented mare's milk, and the faint trace of sandalwood incense, burning in a small brass brazier. Khans, especially in the later imperial years, built for themselves a kind of portable grandeur. Their palaces were sometimes tents, vast enough to hold hundreds, sometimes great pavilions erected in the shade of mountains or near river fords. Everywhere they went, they carried these structures with them, like a snail carrying its shell, reminding all who visited that the steppe's power could transform into imperial splendor at a moment's notice. Inside these halls, there was gold, but also strict etiquette. Visitors performed ritual bows, each gesture measured to the inch, as if one wrong movement could upend the delicate balance of politics. Attendants in robes of deep blue moved quietly among trays of boiled meats, carefully pouring cups of kumi. For the guests seated in rank and file, Khan himself would sit at the highest place, often raised upon a dais or cushioned platform, surrounded by family, loyal guards, and a council of trusted advisors. His presence was both warm and terrifying, like a hearth fire that could scald as easily as it could warm you. There was music, long-necked fiddles called mor and kur, their horsehair strings singing, a haunting melody of galloping hooves. There were songs of victory, of ancestors, and of the wide blue sky that watched over all. Beyond the music, however, lay the constant churn of politics. Rivalries never died, they only shifted beneath the surface. As noble families brought their daughters to marry the Khan's sons, each hoping to gain a foothold in the great web of alliances, arguments flared over grazing rights, over who would command the next raid, or who would be allowed to ride beside the Khan on a hunt. Even a guest seat could be a kind of signal. Too close, and it meant favor. Too far, and it might spell doom for an entire clan's fortunes. In the Khan's court, you might think all was settled, all was secure, but the truth is that power was as shifting as a dune under desert wind. An advisor could rise to greatness in the morning and fall in the evening, banished with barely a whisper. The felt walls closing behind him as if he had never existed at all. Food, too, was a strange theater. Guests were fed generously, but had to observe rules about how to accept, how to taste, and how to refuse without insulting the host. Roast horse, sheep's tail fat, rice brought from China, even dried fish from far Siberian rivers. All these might appear on a grand table, shared among warlords and ambassadors alike. Behind the scenes, the women of the royal household held their own quiet power. Senior wives supervised ceremonies, oversaw the herds that fed the Khan's people, and commanded caravans with gifts and tribute. They were not simply bystanders, but living threads in the cloth of Mongol governance. Even children had their place, sent to foster with loyal allies so they would grow up strong and shrewd, prepared for a life of politics and war. It was a world where love and duty could never fully separate, where affection might be measured by how many horses a child could command, or how well they handled a bow at the age of 8. Through it all, the Khan himself had to project both majesty and accessibility. He was the axle, about which the entire wheel of empire turned, and if he showed weakness, if he faltered, the cracks would spread through all the far-flung corners of his realm. As night fell over the Khan's court, the golden lamps would be trimmed, and guards would take their places at every corner of the compound. The hush of the steppe would creep back in, a reminder that no matter how bright the silk banners, no matter how rich the feast, they were all still children of the grassland, forever bound to the wind. And as you let these images settle, you might sense the steady heart of Mongol rule pulsing there in the dark. Ritual, loyalty, ambition, woven together in a house of felt and gold. Imagine, if you will, the misty morning in a London court. The word court here meaning a tight cluster of houses, crammed together behind factory walls, barely a patch of daylight to call their own. The air is heavy with soot from thousands of coal stoves, the smell of ash mixing with the tamps of damp brick and rotting refuse. Children huddle near a thin cook fire, their hands red from scrubbing laundry, or picking waste from gutters to earn a penny or two. In these places, space was precious. So precious that entire families might share a single room. Its walls streaked with moisture from breath and cooking steam, its floor littered with straw. Meant to soften the hard boards where several people slept side by side, there was no privacy. The outhouses, often no more than a few holes in a plank, over a shared pit, stood at the back of the yard, frequently overflowing and rarely cleaned. The stench would grow so strong in the heat of summer that neighbors simply turned their faces away, pretending not to notice. Food was equally grim. Gruel made of water and oats, sometimes stretched with bits of bread, formed the bulk of a poor family's diet. Meat was a rare luxury, and milk, when it could be bought, was often thin, chalky, and sometimes spoiled before it reached the table. Children gnawed stale crusts, bellies still aching after the meal, while parents hoped to find work that might pay a little more tomorrow. And there was work, but of the harshest kind. In the factories, the noise was deafening, a pounding, shrieking rhythm of gears and steam that stole away a person's hearing as well as their strength. Child labor was common, tiny fingers nimble enough to clean machinery or tie threads where adult hands could not reach. Their hours were endless, their rewards slight, and the injuries, so many crushed limbs, so many burned hands, were accepted as part of the bargain. In the winter, the cold bit deep, Thin clothes gave little defense against wind that found every crack in the ill-fitted walls. Chilblains and frostbite were common among the poorest, who could not afford coal to feed their meager stoves. Frost on the inside of the window was sometimes more beautiful than anything the family could hang on those bare walls, but it came at the cost of blue fingertips and chattering teeth. Disease was a constant companion. Typhus, cholera, tuberculosis. These words were like a dull drum beat in the minds of slum dwellers. Ever present, sometimes striking quickly, sometimes creeping slow through the lungs and the bones. Medical care was little help, for even when doctors came, there was precious little they could do beyond offering laudanum or carbolic wash. Yet somehow life went on. Children played in the alleys, inventing games with broken bits of pottery or skipping ropes made of old rags. Neighbors shared what little they could spare, a spoon of sugar here, a candle there, trying to hold back the darkness for another evening.
Oh.
Church bells still rang on Sundays, calling people to prayer in soot-streaked pews where they might hear sermons about charity and hope. And always, through the grime and the hardship, flickered the stubborn spark of human endurance. So, dear listener, as you breathe gently now, let your mind rest on these images, the endless work, the hard bread, the thin blankets, and know that while these lives were harsh beyond measure, they also held a quiet bravery unseen by most, but no less real. Let us leave for a while the crowded alleys of the slum, step into a quieter place. The mind of a woman who could not ignore the suffering of others. Imagine Florence Nightingale, born to comfort and social position, yet drawn again and again to the art of healing. In her day, a lady of good family was meant to concern herself with dances, poetry, polite society, not the tending of wounds or the washing of bed sores. But Florence was determined, quietly and unwaveringly, to look past convention and seek out a life of usefulness. As she learned with painstaking discipline the mathematics of hospital records, the delicate handling of bandages, the patterns of infection and disease. Numbers, to Florence, were not just abstractions. They were voices, telling the story of avoidable loss. They showed her that filth and neglect could be every bit as deadly as the cannon fire that wounded soldiers in far-off wars. Her moment came in the grim confusion of the Crimean War. Hospitals there were little more than stinking barracks, where the injured lay in rows without proper water, where rats ran freely and gangrene spread from bed to bed. Florence arrived with her nurses into this nightmare, and quietly set about changing it. She believed in fresh air, in sunlight, in the washing of linens, in cleaning away the clotted filth that clung to floors and walls. She ordered the cooking of better food, brought in more water, insisted on the most basic dignity for men who had already lost so much. At night, when all was silent except for the labored breathing of the sick, Florence walked through the wards with a lamp in her hand, checking each patient, recording each death, each survival. They called her the Lady with the Lamp, a gentle silhouette moving through the long rows of cots, watching, listening, never judging, always remembering. Imagine yourself there. The lamp glows soft upon the faces of broken men, the steady footsteps of Florence as she made her rounds. In that pool of calm light, there was a kind of mercy, a reminder that someone cared enough to witness the struggle and work to ease it. Florence Nightingale returned to England not as a fashionable socialite, but as a reformer with facts and figures that no politician could deny. She argued for cleaner hospitals, for trained nurses, for public health measures that would save thousands of lives back in the cities, including the same slums where children starved on cold gruel and neighbors fought off cholera. She understood that disease was no respecter of rank, that if one neighborhood suffered, sooner or later, all would suffer. Through careful research, Florence turned compassion into a methodical science. Charts and diagrams became her weapons of choice, convincing skeptical officials that clean water, clean air, and trained nurses were not luxuries, but necessities. Even after years of exhaustion and her own declining health, Florence continued to write, to organize, to push reforms forward with unstoppable determination. Her influence reached far beyond the Crimea, creating a legacy of public health that echoes into the hospitals we know today. So, dear listener, as you rest and reflect, Allow yourself to be carried by the rhythm of her quiet revolution, the steady, patient care that made so many futures possible. Settle in if you wish, for we are about to descend beneath the paving stones into the damp, echoing labyrinth that quietly sustained Victorian London. Imagine yourself standing at the mouth of a tunnel cut deep into the clay, brick-lined, cool, echoing with the faint, distant trickle of water and waste. A lantern might swing gently in a worker's hand, its light catching on curved walls. Stained by decades of filth, this was the realm of the London sewer, a world hidden beneath polite society, yet woven into its survival. In the earliest years of the 19th century, the sewers of London were a chaotic patchwork of medieval drains and cesspits. Overflow was common, particularly in summer, when rain would wash the contents of those overflowing pits into the Thames. The river itself, foul and rank with the refuse of thousands, became a breeding ground for disease and misery. By mid-century, the crisis had grown impossible to ignore. The summer of 1858, called the Great Stink, brought heat so fierce that the rotting river rose in stench through the very windows of Parliament itself. It was said that lawmakers had to soak curtains in chloride of lime to tolerate their sessions. In that stifling moment, the sewers became a matter not only of public health, but of political urgency. Enter Joseph Bazalgette, an engineer of quiet genius, an unrelenting thoroughness. He envisioned a vast system of brick-lined intercepting sewers, collecting waste from across the city and channeling it away, far downstream, where the tides could wash it clear. His plans were colossal. New pumping stations, embankments, miles upon miles of underground tunnels carefully sloped so the flow would not stagnate. He calculated, measured, built, and supervised a small army of navvies, those laborers of mud and spade who toiled by candlelight in the bowels of London. Imagine the sights and sounds, the rhythmic clink of shovels scraping against clay, the muffled voices of men speaking over the drip of water, the thud of boots on scaffolding high inside a sewer's arched roof. They worked day after day, breathing air thick with damp earth, and the faint, acrid tang of rotting matter. Sometimes strange discoveries emerged from the darkness: bones of animals, the occasional human remains, coins, pottery shards, and countless objects long forgotten by those living above. In this hidden river of waste, the archaeology of the city flowed onward, moment by moment. In time, Bazalgette's system came to life, redirecting disease and filth away from London's heart. The cholera epidemics began to fade, and the river's surface grew calmer, less choked with refuse, more like the Thames people had once dreamed of. Even today, the bones of Bazal's grand design still hold steady. Beneath the modern city, those great brick tunnels continue to carry away what society discards, allowing life above to go on in relative comfort and unthinking ease. So, dear listener, as you breathe easily now, consider how close Victorian London came to collapsing under its own filth, and how a few determined engineers and laborers changed that fate by tunneling through the darkness. If you are still awake, rest for a moment, and let me guide you onward to the final chapter of our journey. The hushed world inside a Victorian manor house, where gaslight flickered, tea was poured, and the quiet power of wealth shaped the rhythms of a different kind of life. Let us leave the sewers behind now, rising gently through layers of brick and soil, to return to the surface, where the soot-choked air gives way, for some 2 rooms of calm ritual and carefully controlled elegance. Picture, if you will, the imposing silhouette of a Victorian manor house, its high-pitched roof and ornate brickwork standing firm against a sky often heavy with rain. Gravel crunches beneath carriage wheels, and the faint clop of hooves announces a visitor's arrival. Stepping inside, the air feels markedly different. It is warmer, sometimes almost stifling with the scent of coal fires and beeswax polish. Velvet curtains keep out the chill, their folds heavy and dust-scented. Gaslight hisses softly from wall-mounted fixtures, casting a golden haze over walnut furniture and gilt-edged picture frames. Here, time seems to move at a different rhythm. There is no frantic rush as in the tenements. Instead, life is measured by rituals, the clatter of silver spoons and delicate teacups, the rustle of starched linen as maids clear away crumbs, the steady tick of a marble clock on the mantel. Servants move with near-silent precision through hidden corridors and narrow staircases, a separate world within these walls. They wake before dawn to lay the fires, polish boots, and warm the shaving water. Their presence is felt more than seen, an ever-present current of labor sustaining the calm above. Imagine the lady of the house, seated by the window with a faint view of a winter garden. She might be engaged in needlework, her fingers pricked now and then by a fine steel needle. Beside her a dish of biscuits, lightly sweet and flavored with lemon zest. The murmur of conversation drifts from the drawing room, where guests discuss politics, the latest novels, and distant wars in polite, measured tones. For the master of the house, duties are equally clear, though softened by rank. Ledgers must be checked, correspondence answered, the estate managed, though never with the urgency of the clerk or laborer. Evening brings a ritual retreat into the library, where rows of leather-bound volumes hold the accumulated knowledge of empires and colonies. At dinner, the great dining table glows beneath a chandelier, lit with dozens of small flames. Game birds are carved, soups ladled, port passed from hand to hand with a decorous slowness. The servants wait silently, watchful, attuned to every gesture. Yet beneath all this ease and refinement lurks a quiet tension. The wealth of the house depends on industry, on colonial trades, on rents collected from crowded slums that we have already visited. It is a delicate illusion of gentility built on the hardships of so many others. Still, within these walls, all is orchestrated to soothe. Music from a pianoforte may rise through the drawing room, a gentle waltz or a hymn played with steady fingers. Candles flicker low as the hour grows late. Servants glide through the shadows to prepare bedrooms with warmed bricks at the foot of each bed. The night settles, the manor seems to sigh, and silence takes hold, broken only by the creak of wood as it cools, or the distant wind rattling a shutter. So, dear listener, we come to the end of our journey tonight, from the harsh alleys of the slums, through the hospitals of reform down to the bowels of the sewers, and finally here, the hushed splendor of a Victorian manor. May this calm tapestry of lives, woven from soot, sweat, and sorrow, help you find your own rest. Sleep now if you can in a world far gentler than the one we have explored. And if you wake again, the history will still be here, waiting for you to return. Rest well,